The events took place in the schoolyard, namely the stadium, where students were actively or not so actively engaged in cross-country running. There was also a pole on which to hang, and the main character who had to pass the standard, and his name was Lin Yuan, and he did not look very confident in all this. The guy jumped on the pole with all his might and started hanging on it. The day was very sunny, and he was wearing a t-shirt and shorts. However, soon the first difficulties began in the form of shaking and heavy breathing, and the teacher was not happy with his performance. His classmates around him also started laughing and arguing with each other, as he was going to hold out and there was no time limit of more than 10 seconds. Our hero held on for 8 seconds and fell back to the ground. The teacher was making fun of him, and the others were just laughing and saying that it was a new record because last time he had only 7. They started insulting him and calling him an 8-second man and mocking the poor young man. Here the story is told from his point of view. He was Lin Wen, who was called the 8-second man and was one of the 3. As a child, he became seriously ill, and when he was able to recover, he became incredibly weak and barely passed the test to the laughter of his classmates. He was also one of the 5 losers, and even his teacher did not support him much, saying that he should try harder the more the entrance exams were coming up, and he would not be able to get even 1 point in physical education. They obviously did not accept medical certificates. Even if he was very involved in other subjects, the hero could not change his fate as a loser. For others, he was garbage, who knew nothing about sports and was ridiculed by other classmates. After all this, he was in the schoolyard, but not at the stadium, and asked a man if there was a parcel for him. The man answered in the affirmative and said that there was 1 parcel sent from northern Guangdong. The boy replied that it was from his father and smilingly thanked Uncle Vanya as he accepted the parcel. His illness had taken away a lot of money and they owed a lot of money, and to pay off the debts his father had gone to work, leaving him with his mother and going to the north. The boy had already started unpacking the parcel. When he opened it, he quickly saw a huge dinosaur and was delighted that his brother had made it, which was a very laborious job, by the way. In addition to the figure, there was also a letter that the boy immediately began to read. It said that his birthday was coming up, and since his father would not be able to be with him, he decided to send a gift and wrote in the letter that the boy was brave and strong and that he loved him very much. The hero almost cried with emotion and added in his head that he also loved his father very much and wanted to become a strong, invincible monster, but it was very difficult. However, while he was getting emotional over the gift and the letter, his action figure was abruptly taken out of the box, which was not good. It was one of his bullies who started mocking him for still playing with toys and, not surprisingly, for still being such a tender-hearted boy, since the boy was certainly several times bigger than our hero. Lin Yuan tried to take him away and jumped around trying to grab back what was his, but it was all in vain and he failed. Now he had not just one opponent, but several. So they continued to beat him, saying that they did not even think that he would resist so stubbornly, but they did not plan to retreat. They began to roll over his dragon and play with it as if it were a ball, while he was asking to give it back, and he clearly did not like it. So, with a volleyball-like serve, the leader of the gang threw the figure on the road and said that if the hero needed it so badly, he could run with it. The dragon landed relatively alive and not badly broken, but the guy was already angry and turned in that direction to his thing, calling him an asshole at the same time. They continued to laugh at him and he started running after his gift with the box in his hands, angry as a dog. However, the boy was so eager to get his action figure that he didn't notice a huge truck coming his way, and when he jumped in to get his gift, it was a bad idea. The boys who were mocking him started to panic and tell him to get out of the way, and another one stared at the truck. The driver wasn't happy either and didn't understand where the kid had come from and tried to somehow get out of the situation by turning the car around or stopping it while yelling at him to get off the road. But the boy, of course, did not have time to do this, so the truck stupidly crashed into him. That was the end. The truck drove a little further after hitting the guy, and he was normally scattered on that road. At the same time, people ran up to him, saying that someone should call an ambulance and help him, for now that was not enough, which was worrying. He lay looking at his gift, because of which this happened, and thought about the fact that he was slowly dying, or had already died. However, the next moment, he already looked different and opened his eyes, wondering where he was. There was water around him and fish swimming. Maybe it was the ocean. The fish, by the way, were not particularly interested in what he was doing there. They were minding their own business. But the boy looked at his hands, which already looked completely different, but were similar to paws. Then she saw her tail and realized that it was his tail. So little by little he got used to what happened. When he had already looked at everything, he began to wonder what had happened and whether he had been hit by a car to death, was upset and shocked. The former boyfriend began to look around and think that maybe this is the other world, but why there was water and fish in it, and he had paws and a tail. Suddenly, a small virtual fish appeared near him, spoke and said that he had entered the network and began to talk about the fact that his consciousness returns to the owner and the evolution of the monster is activated. He did not understand at all what was happening, what kind of fish it was, and what it was talking about. But then he began to question whether he heard what she said about the monster that entered the evolution system, and the fish replied that Xiaokun does not make false statements, so everything she says is true will be true. Then she asked the newly born monster to look at the large screen that appeared in front of him. And in the new training suit, she began to explain that on the screen was written a manual for the use of this system, in which it was written owner, genus, height, mass, skills, and special skills. He listened carefully to everything, but then she began to explain that he had the blood of the ancient lord of the divine beast, Kui, who was written about in the Classic of Mountains and Seas, but he was a small Kui who had not yet grown up. The boy noticed that that Kui was similar to his brother. And since the guy's trick worked, he decided to ask if he could get rewards and improve his skills if he would come in every day and collect rewards, and if he could use those same points for his own improvement. Then he repeated everything that happened, that he was literally reborn and became a sacred beast of the mountains and seas, or just a monster with a system, and the fish just smiled and looked at him in silence. Until then, he had hysterics at the expense of the fact that this is impossible and that it is not a dream, and that it is definitely not a dream. Swimming closer to the assistant, he asked why the sensations of the flapping of his tail and paws felt so real than if it was a dream. Then he said he wanted to log in. The fish was happy and said it would be done and moved its fins. He was then congratulated on his first successful login and told that his new registration location was the Mariana Trench and shown a mini map. Also, he was given rewards for entering. He had a pretty good level skill. Also, by cooking, he could earn evolution points which could improve his growth and skills to learn his victim's abilities. And from now until he dies, he must eat. He didn't understand much about what they were, and he didn't understand what it meant to swallow and what else the S+ skill was. And the fish explained that it was the best ability that monsters were most proud of. Immediately after talking about food, his stomach grumbled, since he was already very hungry. Covering his stomach, he began to ask why he was so hungry. When he began to think about food, as if he did not eat something, he would immediately die of hunger. Later, he saw some light and decided to swim there to it, wondering if he could eat what was shining in the distance. But when I swam closer, I saw a not very good fish, a deep sea fish, a lamprey. It had many clicks, and a lamprey was attached to a stick on its head, which calls other fish to it. The monster retreated a little and insulted the fish by saying that it was just as scary, as in the photos on the internet, and did not really want to swim up. But on the contrary, he began to swim away, and the fish ran away in the other direction in terror, and they disappeared. Then they mockingly turned to him and said that this same fish was several times smaller than him, and he was even afraid of it. He stopped for a moment and answered that he was not afraid at all. The system in response simply remained silent and looked at him skeptically. But he had already started an attack on the unfortunate fish, which was hoping to escape from him. However, she couldn't, but normally got her tail on her face and screamed. But that wouldn't have helped. From fear or a blow, the fish fell out and lay belly up as if dead. And our new monster asked whether it can be eaten at all and whether he will get skills for eating it. He received a positive answer and an application in the form of the fact that if he does not eat anything, he will soon die. He took a fish in his paws and said that it was not the most appetizing thing he had eaten, but he had tasted this fish even in his past life. The system denied, saying that it is not poisonous, but even useful and tasty, pleasant to the taste. She quickly agreed, and he began to change almost like a Winx transformation, but not into a fairy. However, the boy took the fish and swallowed it, and after that he said he thought it would be worse, but in reality it was pretty okay. So he received plus 5 points of the evolution of the deep-seeing fish and was congratulated for eating it and a new ability, namely enlightenment. The monster was happy and said that the system is not deceiving, and he really got a new ability and evolution points. And the fish was smiling as usual, and the system also wrote to him that it was a level C skill, and now because of his dorsal fin that will glow, you can not worry about studying and the fact that the light may be turned off in the dormitory. He immediately decided to try a new skill and activated it with his eyes closed, and his dorsal fin really started to glow. Then he opened his eyes and saw that he was really glowing and quite bright. He was happy about it and began to swim and admire himself. He then commented that it was a really good ability and called a lot of other fish to him, which was a big plus. He noticed that due to evolution, he became an uglier monster and worried less and less about what he should eat. So he ate all the fish that swam around him, and because of this, he received additional points. For example, 5, 15, 50, and at the same time, he was congratulated with receiving various abilities. Also, for example, he received a vision in the dark and stopped being afraid of it. When he had finally had his fill, he swam with a full belly and talked about how in his past life he never ate seafood often. But here he could eat as much as he wanted, especially since he had already received 1,000 evolution points and told the system that wants to start developing. Xiaokun immediately replied that of course, and began to ask what exactly he wanted to improve and began to suggest different options for improvement. He replied that he wanted to improve his scales, giant claws, and body shape. Then the system said that, of course, he began to transform almost like a Winx, but not a fairy, unfortunately. For this, he spent 300 evolution points and was upgraded with scales. Then, for 200 points, he was upgraded and given giant claws. And also, his body shape has noticeably changed, and he has become more prickly than before, just for 500 points. He himself was surprised that for only 500 evolution points, he increased by a meter, which means that it should not be too difficult to increase by 100 meters. And he also looked carefully at himself. He then asked Xiaokun if he was no longer in his world, and he was told that they could not comment, since the owner himself had to find out and discover everything on his own. He replied that it was very interesting because he needed to learn and discover everything himself and asked if it was an open-world game. Xiaokun simply remained silent and pretended to be singing and not hear the question. The monster then pondered the fact that the Mariana Trench indicated that he should still be on Earth, but if he were in a human city, he would surely be fired upon by missiles, and asked if that was the case with the system, and then continued that it seems to him that he is still poorly pumped. But when he can grow up to 100 meters, he will show himself to everyone and will be ready for anything and can easily destroy the entire Earth if he wishes. Therefore, he quickly decided that he needed to eat even more and thereby be able to grow even faster. And without thinking for a long time, he began to attack the surrounding fish, motivated to eat them all as soon as possible. They, in response, began to quickly run away from him. It did not stop him much and he still easily caught them all, but suddenly a huge eye began to appear under him and all this crowd. After that, huge purple tentacles appeared in our field of vision, covering the entire frame. Here, the main character noticed all the tentacles of the octopus, which wrapped him in them, and began to ask what was happening and what it was. But he quickly realized that it was the king and ruler of the deep sea, and he must have captivated him with his shining, luminous back. In general, its characteristics were as follows. The total length was 6 to 12 meters and could reach up to 20. The mass was 1 ton, and it had 10 tentacles, and on each tentacle it had a lot of suckers. But the size of the protagonist was not enough to even see his eyes, and he could not even move, because the power of the Lord of the Depths was so great that he would have suffocated a little more. After that, he began to complain that he was not going to die from his tentacles, especially after his first rebirth. And in general, I almost cried. How suddenly he heard that he was told not to worry, not an easy task in this case. So, this king pulled him closer, and our hero asked about what was happening and whether it was about him at all. As it turned out, this was said by a sperm whale, the length of whose body was 18 meters and the weight of 60 tons. He was the largest toothed whale and could delve into the deepest depths. He swam up to our hero and the one who tried to strangle him, thereby scaring him. From all this, the hero was finally released, and he had time to rejoice that he was alive and free. The monster did not even believe that he was really freed and saved. The picture is of course interesting, our rather small comparatively monster, then an octopus and a whale. It all looked very interesting, of course, like the same page with anecdotes. But our octopus did not give up without a fight and began to attack the sperm whale. Of course he has tricks, you can envy his hopes for life. But the hero understood that after he was reborn into a monster, he got too excited and forgot that compared to these two huge beasts, he was still a thin, weak and small chicken. Therefore, at this moment, he was just looking at the scene in shock, as the octopus, the king of the waves, twisted its tentacles around the whale. But he quickly contradicted himself, saying that now that he was reborn into a monster, he will not bury his head in the sand. That's why he still didn't run away from there, because I would have done that a long time ago and should have been forgiven. The ex-boyfriend began to have flashbacks to the fact that he was always there, and a real monster should be cruel, strong, and bloodthirsty. He believed that such qualities should be possessed by a strong monster standing at the top of the food pyramid. Therefore, before all this, he began to grind his teeth. He also made a fist and said that he would never run away from Lin Yuan again. The interesting fact was that he had cool blue claws. And then, after all these flashbacks, he began to get angry and shout that no one would dare to mock him again and began to look like he was under the influence of rabies. With all his strength, he began to run and swim towards the two monsters that were fighting, hoping for the best. Then he began to bite one of them on the head and said that if he dared to anger him, he would tear him to pieces. But he even managed to tear off such a normal piece from the tentacle of the one who tried to strangle him. But he began to chew it and eat it, thinking that it tasted like a simple raw squid. But of course, he ate appetizingly. That's how he got 21 evolution points and the power of the master of the sea depths. But he was quite delighted with the fact that he got as many as 21 points from one small bite. After that, he realized that he needed to act and began to tear that squid into small pieces, thinking about what he would eat until he died, so he got more and more of those evolution points. The situation was like this. The whale was angry with the squid for still holding it with its tentacles. The squid was almost crying because our hero was eating it, and he was just eating yum-yum. When Lin Yuan had already eaten almost half of the tentacles, they started looking askance at him, and the squid wanted to start attacking him again. Quite deservedly, so I would say. Here the hero was already dissatisfied because he realized that he was noticed and already began to twist with tentacles and thought about why he was being attacked only because of his small size. After that, he made a maneuver that helped him get out, and he knew that he was actually quite strong and that he couldn't be defeated that easily. He was generally tired of always being underestimated. He thought that now he was a monster. Now he was not afraid of anything and continued to eat the tentacles of his enemy. He continued to get angry, and the veins on his forehead began to show because he was eating it so safely. But while he was busy and looked at the hero, the sperm whale already started attacking him. This was unexpected. Now the poor man was being eaten from both sides, and he couldn't even really do anything. Until he felt sorry for him, he almost cried there himself. In the end, both ate the unfortunate man and lay down with full bellies and satisfied with themselves for such hard work. As a result, he was awarded 3,000 evolution points for eating the Lord of the Sea Depths. And he is only happy because, despite the fact that he ate only half, he received so many points. But after he only had time to think about it, the same sperm whale began to swim up to him and smile suspiciously. Lin Yuan also noticed this. He rolled up his imaginary sleeves and began to bully, first asking what he was watching and if he was looking for a fight. He was in a serious mood. In his mind, the whale had already imagined how the prickly one was standing across his throat, and that's why he didn't like this picture. And our hero was already quite angry and wondered why he was looking down on him, and that it was very arrogant if he didn't know. However, the whale, no longer wanting to deal with him, began to turn little by little and swim in a completely different direction from the hero. Lin Yuan decided that it was his merit and said about himself that he just decided to let him go this time, and purely because he helped him. After that, he turned to Xiaoqun again, saying that he wanted to become even bigger, and he was only happy. So, for 500 points they improved and increased his mass, For another 500 they increased his claws, for the same amount they made sharper teeth, and for 1500 they improved the shape of his body. And he actually began to grow and transform. Now his characteristics have changed a little as well. That is, the Kui family, namely the pink dragon. The form was a juvenile developing pedigree, was majestic with the possibility of improvement. The height was now 8 meters, and the mass was 24. The skills were destruction, bites, dragon tail. Special skills were absorption, enlightenment, and night vision. The dragon even began to feel a new surge of strength, power, new power, and all that. Also, in my opinion, he already believed in himself too much. But nevertheless, he started talking about how it's a pity that there is no Huabe monster here because he could have had a nice snack with it. And he began to look around and think that with such speed and taking into account the fact that he still has 50 pieces from the Lord of the Sea Depths, he will be able to become a 50-meter monster. And it doesn't matter whether he will eat on the street for deep sea or sperm whale, the result is one and the same. While he was thinking about this, Xiao Kun was next to him again, who said that he was greeting him, and because of eating the Lord of the Depths, he had a monster compass, a new tool in his inventory. He replied that every time he was more and more surprised by all this and asked what this thing gave him in general. It was explained to him that if there are monsters around him, then with the help of this thing, he will be able to know in which direction they are. He had a level and could learn even the breath of another monster. And also, if you used it alone, you could find strange friends, but you had to be careful with creatures that were bigger than you. The hero replied that he sees a benefit in him, because even if the opponent is stronger than him, he will not die, because he will be able to sneak up quietly and will know where the opponents are. So he swam somewhere and thought that with this thing, even the Lord of the Sea Depths is not scary to him now. And then he decided that it is better to turn off the light on his dorsal fin. Otherwise, it is a cool skill, but not for that. A week later, he was sailing somewhere again and was already on top and saw some land and said that he had miscalculated because there were no big fish there and he couldn't get his fill of great white sharks. With a body size of 30 meters, even the Lord of the Sea Depths does not give as many evolution points as he would like. But he also scared him and he now hid and did not even show himself to him. But at least that was how it was in Lin Yuan's mind. And he generally understood that he could not swim further in the shallow water because in this way he would soon die of hunger because he was already hungry, tired, and not very happy. So the decision was made to dive deeper again, and because of that, he told Xiao Kun that he wanted to log in, and because of that, he stopped. As a result, he was quickly let into the system, namely the Sea of Polar Islands. And he was also given a reward for entering, namely a new level sea skill, the explosive breath of the north. This power could simply be destructive, since the energy could now be released through the mouth. Therefore, this ability had to be used wisely, as it was also the strongest skill in their history. Therefore, he was incredibly happy, saying that he had completely forgotten that entering the system of new places gives incredible skills, and he didn't even want to ask anything, because he believed that he got to an incredible place. Lin Yuan turned his attention to his thing, which began to glow, saying that the compass should show that there were a lot of monsters on the island, but there was no one there, and wondered how this could even be possible. As a result, he decided to go upstairs and see what was there. There were very strong currents, and if it were not for its length of 30 meters and weight of 90 tons, then it would simply have been carried away from there. Despite the currents, Lin Yuan swam closer to the underwater rock and examined it. Then he gripped her with his claws so hard that she began to crack, and began to climb up it. It was clearly not easy for him because he was sweating, and it was clear from his face that he was not entirely happy with such an activity. Nevertheless, he climbed further and further on this rock and even managed to climb out, and he was already high above sea level. For some time, the hero climbed the rock and then finally set his foot on the green grass of the island. If you start looking at what was around him, it was other mountains, greenery, forests and trees, and a few birds that were flying in the sky. However, there were not only plants and, as the compass showed, there were also other monsters and animals. For example, a giant dragonfly. With a length of 0.75 meters, it was the largest insect of all existing on Earth. And there was also an ancient centipede 2.6 meters long, which was also the first invertebrate to appear on Earth. Of course, Lin Yuan understood that there was no one there except various monsters and animals, and those that remained were prehistoric creatures. And that it was probably all because of the space-time anomaly of this island, which was called G1. And it was because of this anomaly that so many prehistoric creatures appeared here. And then, laughing a little, he was glad that he was very lucky, since there are a lot of giant creatures here, which means a lot of evolution points for him. But he said that survival on an uninhabited island begins right now and went to the middle of the island. Walking past all the surrounding trees, the dragon thought that even though he could breathe underwater and at great depth, he still really liked fresh air and vegetation. Like here, for example. That's why he breathed in full chest. Meanwhile, pterosaurs were circling and flying above him, and he, being attentive, quickly noticed it and looked up. These dinosaurs were green and with open mouths. They made a certain sound and looked at our hero with what I think were not very good intentions. And in the next moment, one of them began to fly at full speed straight at Lin Yuan with a sly and sinister grin. He quickly realized that they considered him their prey and was a little surprised at this, since he was so big and they were much smaller and even dared to treat him as some kind of dish. He himself began to get very angry and they began to peck at his back with their long beaks, if you can call them that. Also, due to the fact that his hands were not in a very anatomically convenient position and were not long, he could not catch them, and because of this, he became even more upset and grimaced and angry. But after some time, he was suddenly able to bite off the tail of that pterosaur with his mouth. A tear appeared in his eyes. The dinosaur tried to escape from there and get rid of the grip, but our hero already held him firmly and did not plan to let go so easily. His conclusion was that it tasted like chicken and even crunched. He was able to get 370 pterosaur evolution points, and he was also congratulated on his first eating by his eating, so he got another 1,000 evolution points. When that flying dinosaur was no longer moving, he put it on the ground and started eating from it. Probably it was more convenient for him. The other pterosaurs did not dare to fly close to him, so they moved away little by little. The hero looked at them and was glad that he could finally try something new, because he was tired of eating the same seafood every day. And then, looking at those dinosaurs that started to run away from him, he said that if they are not ready to come down on him, then he will try his new skill that he just got on them. And his mouth began to glow. And then he all began to sanctify his mouth, which was wide open, and his back. Pterodactyls tried to escape in their last moments. But unfortunately or fortunately, they froze from the shock and from what was happening, because they were not ready for this. Life did not prepare them for this, as they say. But a huge ball of light began to gather in the hero's mouth, and he himself did not move much, apart from that. The birds were not jokingly scared, and one of them was trying to find support, while the other was just looking angrily at Lin Yuan. And when the hero began to pelt them with fire, they scattered, flew in different directions from each other, due to terror and fright. However, the ball of fire did not fly far, which caused the pterodactyls and the hero to panic, who now did not know what to do and became nervous because of it. The dragons, quite legitimately, got angry and started getting ready to attack the boy, who tried unsuccessfully to calm them down by saying that they all needed to calm down and take it easy. But, of course, this did not save him, and if it did, I would be very surprised, but they all already started flying at him with all their stupidity. Also, there were already significantly more of them than before, and they all began to attack him at the same time, and the hero did not understand where so many of them came from at all. He began to blame and curse the system, asking what kind of explosive breath it was like a lighter. He was told that it was just exhalation, and he did not understand what it meant at all. Xiao Kun looked at him skeptically. They still decided to show him the instructions, which turned out to be that it was necessary to close his eyes and relax, then gather all the energy into one pulse. The dorsal fin should start to glow, and he should release an explosive pulse. And it was further explained to him that in order to use a normal explosive impulse, he needs to concentrate and feel how the energy circulates through his body. Also noticed that it was very similar to the chi purification technique he had read about in the cultivation novel. But after that, he asked Xiao Kun if he was sure that this was the correct instruction. But then, he already scored on it, and when they started attacking him again, he simply asked the system to tell him how to use this explosive breath, because he would be eaten so soon, and he already had bumps anyway. I don't know how many times Zhao Kun began to explain to him that he just needs to concentrate and gather all the energy of his body in one place, and, as an example, he showed his stomach by tapping on it. The hero gathered his strength and began to try to do it with all his might. It was clear that he was really trying. While he was busy concentrating and gathering energy, someone's green, huge paw flew at him, thereby throwing him into a frenzy and scratching his face straight to the point of blood. Kui grimaced at this and gritted his teeth. Therefore, from all these attacks, he fell to the floor in pain. Blood poured from him and pterodactyls flew above him. And after he fell down, they started biting his back, and because of that, a lot of blood poured out of him. The hero understood that everything was bad because he did not know how to escape from them and did not have the strength to fight against them. He understood that he was beaten like a fool. But he didn't understand what happened to him because not long ago he was a huge, scary monster. But now what? Zhao Kun heaved and held his head, realizing that his subordinate was in a very bad situation. Lin Yuan suddenly remembered that he had already felt something similar. Therefore, now his flashbacks about how he was once brutally beaten have gone. They taunted him and he tried to resist them and think that his loved one was standing next to him. This gave him a little strength, and although he was crying and beaten, he had a desire for revenge in his eyes. Therefore, he easily connected the two parallels and now had the same purposeful look in his eyes. Zhao Kun laughed, covering his eyes because he was such a loser in school. But it didn't matter because he already talked about the fact that he was able to and had his own plan in mind for this. The boy used all his strength to break out of his ecstasy and knock his rimmon off his feet and off balance. He got a second wind. Now he thought that he should forget about the pain, concentrate completely on his revenge, and he managed to start a fire in the end. It was with this ability that he was able to defeat those pterodactyls who came under attack. Those who did not fall immediately went flying against their will. And he stood still a bit in shock after he did it and took a breath. Immediately after he realized what he had done, he began to rejoice greatly because he had managed to defeat them. He also praised this ability, saying that it is very useful and generally chic. But it took a lot of his strength for this. So now he felt limp and tired, so he decided that he needed to eat and regain his strength after such a busy day. Unfortunately, when he looked down, he saw that all the dinosaurs were burned, and he was not very happy about it. He had no other choice, so he started eating them anyway, thinking that he had actually cooked them himself. For this, Koi received 425 points of pterosaur evolution and the same amount 2 more times. When he ate them all, he went further into the forest. I think about the fact that he finally finished everything and went full on carbohydrates. The young man now had a different mission, namely trying to find water because his throat was dry. Then he found some kind of lake and a huge hole created by his explosive breath in the rock near him. He was glad that he found the lake because it was difficult to find, especially since it was very old. He thought about the fact that there must be a lot of animals because of this, and the water should be drunk quietly, and then he began to suspect something unclean and worried whether everything was okay with the water, because it all looked very suspicious. However, to his great surprise, there was no one around at all, but there was a stone that he was looking at. But very quickly it turned out that it was not a stone, but a buffalo with it on its back, which had just risen from the water. Seeing this, he was shocked and froze with his mouth wide open. It was a giant cow Dashan, although he understood that there was nothing to be surprised about, but he did it anyway. For some time, they stood looking at each other with neutral expressions on their faces. This cow is 90 meters long and weighs 180 tons. He usually lived in lakes and rivers, and his back and belly overgrown with vegetation and bones, so it looked like a mountain. Also, he could stay under the ice for up to 4 days, and his back was excellent camouflage. But suddenly, after a moment of silence, crocodiles began to attack Dashan and bite his legs, thereby surprising the monster. These were not just crocodiles, but a species of imperial crocodile. There were many of them, and they all came a little closer to the cow. In general, they lived in Africa in ancient times and are one of the largest crocodiles of all in existence. Their length was 13 meters and their weight was 6 tons. Also, these creatures surrounded the cow, preventing her from escaping. But they began to attack again, biting everything, doing it all with all their strength, which would be very painful. After a while, there was a splash of water and an attack, and water started splashing around. As it turned out, the crocodiles had already eaten Dashan and left only the spine, after which they began to blurt out about their business. However, not far, as they quickly noticed Lin Yuan, who was standing not far from them in shock at such an interesting picture. Now he understood why no one was there, that it was because of them, but he himself considered himself ready for battle and thought that he would easily defeat them. So he began to approach them and wanted to show them where the crayfish spend the winter. But the crocodiles were tougher, so they also attacked with their huge mouths with sharp teeth. Suddenly, the crocodile froze in the air before he could even close his mouth, because something did not go according to his plan. A huge hand appeared out of nowhere and firmly grabbed this imperial beast by its tail and pulled it away. Our hero then looked at it widely and thought about what it could be. Meanwhile, the hand swung again and threw the unfortunate opponent into the rock. There were almost tears in his eyes. The hero froze a little and became nervous because he did not understand what it was, who it was, what was happening. It was some huge monkey that jumped in there and started crushing the other emperor crocodiles. Now we were told that it was an ancient monkey that didn't look very friendly, quite the opposite. So now he was still standing on the shore, and the monkey in the lake was eating crocodiles. A lot of things happen in a short amount of time. The crocodiles that had the opportunity did not come close to the monkey, and others were not so lucky. And then he started throwing them in the air. I don't respect throwing food. And they all successfully fell into one big pile, splashing water around. And after throwing them there, he himself immediately jumped to them. But then he calmly ate and suddenly looked somewhere to the side, turning away from the food. It was already getting dark on the street, and then the monkey looked at Lin Yuan, who was still standing by the lake on the shore. But he stood with folded hands and looked not very pleased. Noticing this, the monkey was not very happy about it and stopped eating for a moment. Lin Yuan understood that his near adversary thought he wanted to eat him, but actually he didn't, because he was not to his liking and he didn't want to anger him. So he nervously waved him sweetly, thinking that the hero does not tolerate losses. Ta said that the monkey's name was Xiao Yuan, and he was just passing by. Then he wondered if what he was saying made any sense. But he decided that Vava probably didn't understand. It was further explained to us that smiling gorillas can talk about two things, and only in two cases. In the first, it means that they are nervous or scared. When she raises her hand, it means that the gorilla is asking for something to be given to her, or is asking another gorilla to go or come closer. But the monkey didn't like what Lin Yuan was doing, because it thought that he was pretending to be scared and just wanted to trap him like this. And she thought about what she would show him now, where the crayfish spend the winter. Therefore, with strength and fury, she began to beat her own chest and scream. At this moment, Kui realized that this was not good and did not understand why she was so angry. Yes, he was not happy about the situation because Varvara came closer and closer, and because of this, it became clear that she was even bigger than he expected. But the hero did not give up and still tried to escape from her, but not very successfully. Therefore, while he was running away, fists started swinging at him, and he barely managed to dodge one of them. And even in such a situation, he was able to criticize Varvara for the fact that there were gaps in her attacks and that she is simply very evil and abnormal, and that's what pulls her out. After the criticism, there was also the understanding that gorillas had well-developed limbs, but not so much intelligence, because the attacks were very primitive and uniform. It looked as if his enemy was blind and had only his muscles. So, after a certain time, he decided to strike himself and wanted to stop the blow of the barbarian, and he surprisingly succeeded. The hero had a plan, which was to first dodge and then bite if the gorilla's strike was uncertain. That's why he did it. After that, he turned the situation in his direction and rejoiced because now the monkey should lose his support and center of gravity. The gorilla was clearly nervous from the surprise. And then the dragon began to wave his tail in a desire to knock him off his feet. The plan worked and the barbarian really almost fell, collapsing from the blow. And at the end, Kui wanted to deliver a fatal uppercut. that is, the end of the battle, so he swung with all his might. It looked very epic, I must admit. But his final blow failed because of a detail he had actually forgotten to strike. Namely, that he did not have long enough pause for this, so the hero could not reach them to hit. The gorilla was speechless. Here our Superman panicked because he realized that he made a little mistake not taking into account this moment and understood that now he had a cover. But the gorilla again began to attack with his muscles with even greater fury than before. As a result, the barbarian normally flew into the hero, which he did not have time to dodge. It was epic. Therefore, as a result, I ended up lying on the ground, but at least I am alive. And for that I thank you. The gorilla began to make some unintelligible sounds, and Lin Yuan realized that she was not only stronger than him, and she had much more agile movements than him. So now the dragon was trying to catch his breath, while the gorilla in the background was beating herself in the chest, but she was at a certain distance from the boy. However, unfortunately for Lin Yuan, the barbarian leapt across the entire distance between them and struck him on the back. Understanding that the hero understood that with such strength of the enemy, he could defeat him only with the help of explosive breath. And for this, it took time to accumulate energy. However, the gorilla did not plan to wait, and the hero understood that if he did not get there, he would have serious trouble, and for now, he just needed to restrain him. He did this by biting the barbarian's hand until it bled, thereby forcing him to stop a little. It all looked very epic. The monkey continued to try to open the boy's mouth and free his hand, and the hero continued to hold on and did not stop. Here the gorilla realized that something was wrong and started to get a little nervous, but she was able to open the dragon's mouth and take her hand away. After that, she began to open it even more herself. Even after being injured through her teeth, the other did not resist much. And suddenly, a blue glow appeared, which was directed directly at the barbarian, thus catching him disarmed. Nevertheless, the monkey did not have time to accept anything, but a layer of light was already created from the hero's mouth. In addition, Lin Yuan's back also began to glow and become sharper than before. At this moment, his opponent realized that his business was completely bad and did not understand what kind of tricks these were. But because of the shock, he couldn't even move and start running away or do anything to protect himself from the oncoming wave. And Lin Yuan began to rejoice because now it was not so easy to defeat him and that he had shown who was the real master here. Now, a ball of light appeared, which was directed towards the barbarian and thereby forced him to retreat. But when he wanted to run away, he realized that the hero's tail was wrapped around his leg. The dragon did not plan to let him go so easily and wanted him to try his fire. And after that, he sent his opponent flying with his huge electric wave. As a result, the monkey normally rolled on the ground like this, leaving behind only dust clouds. But he was able to stop only when he hit a stone and began to bleed to the ground. Nevertheless, the result was not what the hero expected, because this breath could destroy dozens of pterosaurs or even destroy stones, but it did not even leave a strong wound for the gorilla. He was shocked to think how strong his opponent's body was, if it didn't even kill him. The gorilla once again looked at the hero, who was standing a little far away. She quickly jumped over the stone she crashed into and started running away from there. He said that he defeated the king on this island, so now he is the boss here. And he himself understood that he would not succeed in such a trick again. Meanwhile, he was also being looked at by the imperial crocodiles who understood that he was not really that strong, especially after he used a lot of his energy for that strike and they could easily eat him. He did not go to them, but began to eat the scraps of crocodiles that the others did not eat. That's how he got another 560 evolution points. Also because of this, he got another new skill, namely improved armor. And he was very happy about it, because why not? But he had more confidence in himself and felt as if he could beat anyone with one punch. And he was even able to frighten other crocodiles. But I got another 550 points as a result, and then the same number. A week later, he started using a lighter version of explosive breath to make a fire with a light breath. But he was glad of his ingenuity and the fact that now he can use it to cook and fry his food. But he considered himself a genius, and that's what he was doing right now, roasting his own meat. And then he continued to eat, but he said that he wanted to log in. And as a result, he entered the C part of G1 Island. As a reward, he also received the A-level skill, Atomic breathing. Its skill was that it was an unstable gas that was created by the radioactive capsule in the Brontosaurus and reacted with air, and this resulted in the release of a flame that looked like a mist. It was also the strongest flame that came out of the mouth. Upon learning this, Lin Yuan lit up with joy because he equated himself with a European emperor. But the fact that if he had logged in the day before yesterday, he would have received a compass upgrade that would allow viewing the attributes of monsters. But yesterday there was an opportunity to also get the A-level skill, Spiked Armor, and today I got the Atomic Breath skill and was happy about it. The hero continued to eat and talk about the fact that he would not spend money on such a game when suddenly a rat began to sneak up on him. But later she stopped and started to pee. It was a giant prehistoric rat. It was 3 to 4 meters long, God help you, and weighed 3 to 4 tons. They had sharp teeth, a good sense of smell, and were picky eaters. They usually hid in the grass, waiting for rabbits to attack. Somehow, Lin Yuan was able to spot her and called her a mandarin and that she was on time. And he said that today they have beef. After that, he began to wax nostalgic and talk about how the rat reminded him of his past life, when he was an ordinary boy, and even squatted while he spoke. And he continued that in the past he was thin and small. He was bullied for days. But at the end he added that the Mandarin woman was luckier than him because she met him. And from this day he will be her boss, will cover and protect her from others. Lin Yuan stood up again, while she sat on the meat in the meantime. The boy's characteristics have improved significantly for the entire time. Now his height was 51 meters and his weight was 255 tons. The attacks were as follows: a dash, a bite, a swing. Tail, special skills. Level, C Dragon Tail, Night Vision E, Enlightenment E, Monster Compass, B+, Explosive Breath C, Atomic Breath A, Spiked Armor B. The actual lineage as the Lord of the Divine Beast Lord Kui from the classic of mountains and seas. Kuei was happy looking at himself and thought that now he could easily defeat the gorilla completely. Being alone on an uninhabited island was boring, so he wanted to find a monster to keep him company. But the gorilla, Barbarian, looked intelligent and strong, but he doubted that she would accept him so easily. Therefore, Lin Yuan shouted to Xiaokun that he needed evolution points, and he immediately appeared. He was told that he had 4,831 evolution points, and if he spent them all, it would improve his body shape by... The hero began to transform and glow because of it. But Xiaokun ended by saying that it would increase by 0.5 meters. The guy tried it on and was disappointed with the result. And he began to ask how it was that more than 40,000 points increased it to almost nothing, and asked if it was possible some kind of mistake or failure. But he was answered that no, and everything is correct. Lin Yuan was indignant that once several hundreds had increased him by a meter, but here it was. Xiaokun asked if he had never played RPG games, and that here, as in them, at a higher level, you need more points to develop, and tried to be more delicate. At first he panicked and said that he really thought they were playing a game, but quickly changed his mind and said that they probably were. But he was sad because of the understanding that to become a 100-meter monster he would have to wait many years or eat a lot. But at the end he asked if there was a monster that had evolved more than him. But later he gave up on it and went to throw stones and decided that then it would be better to go to the gorilla, Varvara, defeat her and thus start their relationship. As it turned out, the hero did not just lose his mind but found a pile of wool and even shone. Then he threw him in Mandarin and said that it was time for her to work and not just eat and drink with him. But he began to explain that last time, when he fought with the gorilla, he tore a piece of fur from it and asked if the smell remained there. The rat pecked a couple of times as a sign that it was, and then asked if the Mandarin could find the barbarian by smell. At the end, he added that if she helped him, he would provide her with barbecue for the whole year. She beamed and began to nod her head. And then Picala showed where she and they went up the mountain together. Everyone saw him off with drums, the crocodiles rejoiced, and others said that at last the god of plague had left them and left them alone. But if he hadn't left, he would have eaten their whole family. Lin Yuan looked at this and thought that they would all be covered when he returned there again. After some time, they came to a dark place. It was dark, foggy, strange mountains, and nothing grew. Everything was dead. And he asked what kind of place it was. Tangerine began to shake with fear because of this place, and the hero wondered why there was such a place on the island, which was so gloomy, dark, and embodying horror. They reached a cave, and the boy asked if the mandarin had made a mistake somewhere and led him to the wrong place, because it did not look like a gorilla's house at all. He did not understand who could live there at all, since even birds did not fly there, which is a serious sign of danger, and it even smelled terrible. And his compass did not detect any monsters around, but the tangerine continued to peck and point to the cave. Lin Yuan picked her up as she was horrified, and asked again if she was sure the path led here. And in the end, he decided that it was worth going in and taking a look, and continued to hold the mandarin girl who was trying to protest. And he was even surprised that she was shaking so much and wondered if there really was some kind of monster there. But he reassured her by telling her not to be nervous, because he would protect her if they went to the middle. Even when they entered, the compass showed nothing further. There was no gorilla or other monsters on it. However, at one point, the roar of some monster was heard, but it was not strong, so the hero doubted that it was the barbarian. And inside the cave in general, there was a lot of cobwebs, some slime and stench. Lin Yuan said that they would just carefully see what was going on and looked off into the distance. When this team went further, they saw many strange cocoons and broken eggshells, which they did not like. He began to suspect that it was a spider's lair, so he began to look around. The tangerine just held and did not move. After some time, the dragon saw someone else and began to look closely. And it was the gorilla we already knew, but in the form of a short-haired girl with brown hair who was glued to the wall. Also, the gorilla, the barbarian, had a pedigree of the ancient evil monster Aoju, which was also described in the Classic of Mountains and Seas. The length was 45 meters, and the weight was 135 tons, but it is not clear what he ate that became a man. Quay was generally very surprised by what he saw and at first did not believe that it was a real barbarian. But he began to ask what had happened, that the gorilla had become a man and also a woman. Here she also noticed the dragon and looked in his direction, turning there. He came closer to her and said that she was so big the last time they met, but now she was so small, and noticed that the wound on her chest still hadn't healed. In response, the girl started muttering, asking what he was doing here at all, and she didn't look happy. I can't judge her. Her situation is not the best, of course. Quay smiled and was surprised that she not only became a human, but also could speak like a human. But he put forward a hypothesis that maybe the barbarian turned into a spirit and then became a little fairy. But he was not answered because she shouted for him to be careful and turn around at last. With the rest, the hero did it and finally saw a bunch of monsters crawling towards him, and he was surprised to see it. The woman continued muttering and scolding him that she had become human and asked why he did not come to her earlier. But while she was arguing, the monsters, which had already managed to get close enough, began to attack him. But it was not difficult for him, as a big monster, to grab him and crush him with his fist. That monster did not give up and tried to get out of Lin Yuan's fight, but it was not successful. It also turned out to be a dead, rotting reptile that had the lineage of the Xiangliu's monster recorded in the Shanghai Jing. Its length is 60 meters and its weight is from 30 to 300 tons. They usually live in groups, have sharp claws and a strong tail, could secrete terrible poison. Lin Yuan found them disgusting and also remembered a situation from his past. It consisted in the fact that he was once frightened by lizards. This reptile is also an old enemy of the gorilla, the barbarian, because the gecko is the ruler of the underground world of Jiyuan Island. While the hero was remembering the past, this same reptile wanted to bite his hand. But he did not miss it and said that he should just try, and as a result completely crushed him and did it right. However, this left slime on his paw. It was disgusting, but there was nowhere to go. Another problem also appeared. The others also licked and crawled to him. He looked at all this and shook the slime from his paw. And they began to attack him with their mouths open. The hero yelled for them all to stay away from him and just began to press on everything with his paws and became angry. Having squeezed one, the other crawled already on his back and he quickly noticed it turning there. The gecko on his back wanted to bite him on the back and even did so. But immediately after that, his teeth fell apart and crumbled, because he did not take this moment into account. The one who bitten flew from the back, but he was not the only one there, and there were many others who climbed further. The hero began to grind his teeth and thought to himself that if he struck, he would now show them all his power. But it was activated and the others began to fly away from the electricity or were impaled by new and long spikes. The girl who was still glued to the wall was shocked by such a thing. Then the geckos alone burned and fell, or simply fell. And he turned to the girl, his eyes glowing blue. Afterwards, he breathed a sigh of relief and was glad that he was able to get rid of the lizards around him. After that, he began to panic because he was covered in slime and he was very disgusted by it. And she looked at him in surprise, not understanding what was wrong with him. As it turned out, the hero had not yet killed all the slimes, and one of them at some point changed the focus of his gaze from Lin Yuan to the gorilla girl, whose existence had been forgotten for a certain time. Against her background, these lizards looked simply gigantic, which was logical in general, and they had already begun to attack her. But the hero quickly stopped the gecko by simply stepping on it, and that was it. The dragon came to her defense and said that if anyone tried to approach her, then someone would have to pass him. The others were no longer so sure and were frightened, afraid to come closer because they saw their dead friend. Therefore, now they stayed further and did not approach, which was already a plus. Nevertheless, it did not suit him, and he was angry that they did not leave there, even though he had let them go. So, as a result, he launched his breath at them, simultaneously shouting that they are disgusting and that now they will all die. And so it happened, and they were completely burned as a result because it was right, but it was necessary to leave immediately. The barbarian continued to look at the hero with interest, since she could not do anything herself. At the same time, Lin Yuan turned to her and called her a sister, told her not to worry because no one would harm her, and smiled, showing a heart. The heroine was in shock, and he finally freed her, tearing the cobwebs with which she was attached to the wall. Then she removed the web herself and was finally able to move freely. And the boy's eyes were focused on the girl's chest, or rather on her wound. However, he quickly coughed and turned away, asking what had happened that made her human, and thought that the wound looked very serious. Finally, the woman landed on the ground and Kui just watched. Against his background, she now looked very small, no matter how the girl was now even smaller than a rat. Then she started picking up bones, and he wondered what was going on and whether the girl was looking for a new weapon for herself. The hero raised his hands to show peace and told her not to be afraid because he never intimidates the weak, but a mandarin appeared in the frame. Suddenly, he saw that the girl raised something in her hands. She raised something incomprehensible in her hands. But she began to show that by eating what she held in her hands, one could change, just like her. Kui was interested in this and asked if it was because of this fruit that the girl, the barbarian, became like this. And he compared it with the devil's fruit, a fruit, the reverse of fantastic novels. She confirmed it with her movements. After that, they finally came out of this dark cave. He boastfully pointed to himself and said that now the girl will see a miracle. She, on the other hand, looked at the top with interest to see him because of the difference in height. And he began to breathe with his skill, lighting a fire. Because of this, the heroine almost fainted. She had to hold on. And she was even shaking from all that. Lin Yuan tried the baked lizard, but quickly changed his mind, thinking that it was something he was not ready to eat. But for the sake of points, he needed to do it. The gorilla looked at him questioningly. However, to his surprise, it didn't even smell so bad, but even very tasty. The girl looked with interest and stood below. She also smelled so delicious that her stomach started grumbling. She was also hungry. The hero remembered his friends and gave them a barbecue. The tangerine was peeling and the girl was happy and glowing. And after he had set it before them, they immediately began to eat. All three had a very tasty family dinner. After eating one, he told the monkey that he likes her much more in this form and asked if the girl could become a barbarian again. The woman happily ate, and he continued that if she were a gorilla, then even those reptiles would not be a problem for her. She explained that the girl was stuck in this form and couldn't transform anymore, but she didn't look too upset right now. Kui was even interested in what kind of fruit she ate. But it was a clear fact that she would not be able to live like that in the jungle. And in general, it was very tasty. Now, he was interested in whether she has parents, family, brothers, sisters, or she is the only one in the family. And at the same time, he remembered his childhood with his father and how they ate kebabs together. The hero understood that if it weren't for him, she would have been eaten by reptiles in the cave, and in this form, she might not live until tomorrow. While the Mandarin and the girl were eating, he summoned Xiaokun and asked if he could turn her back into a gorilla. He replied that maybe this system is a whole science. However, for this Xiaokun needed to analyze the composition of the fruit she ate. Lin Yuan was happy to hear that if they found that fruit, Xiaokun would be able to return her body to her. Ribka began to explain that if he analyzes the composition, then he will be able to change it, and after eating another fruit, she will become a barbarian again. And then it will make it possible to transform from a gorilla into a human and vice versa. He quickly became happy and said that then they must find that fruit. But he had a plan that if he could turn into a human, he would be able to return to the human world to his family. But he dreamed of the same meeting after parting with hugs. Then he remembered that for the first time he appeared in the Mariana Trench, which means that the boy is on Earth and will be able to return to his relatives. He began to ask whether she remembered where she picked this fruit. The girl replied that there was a pile of bones on the rock. The hero said that he understood now they will eat well and she will take them away and they will still pick those fruits. After that, he will be able to help her turn back. He was given 645 evolution points for a dead rotten reptile. He was congratulated on this and given an additional 20,000 evolution points as a reward. He was very happy about this because the more of them, the better. Then he began to think about the fact that right now Kui is not on Earth, which means that he is traveling around the worlds. But he thought that when he became a man, he would be able to start dating a monkey and live happily ever after on this island. 2 hours later, they were already on their way to the place the girl was talking about in search of those fruits. However, there were a lot of human bones there, which means that it should be more difficult to search. The dragon looked around. The monkey was on his shoulder, and he himself was asking questions like what happened here in front of them. The barbarian sat sweetly and pointed her finger in one direction, vaguely saying that the fruit should be there. Lin Yuan now saw a turf with fruits that was in the middle of the mountain and considerably taller than our dragon's height. Somehow, they were able to get a closer look at those fruits that looked like mushrooms, and the girl confirmed that they were them. And the boy was surprised and said that he would not even have thought that they could do such a thing. Kui pretended to roll up his sleeves and said he'd go up and rip a few. But he began to climb the mountain while the girl held onto him tightly, not wanting to fall. Suddenly, a pterosaur flew from above and he panicked lest he decide to attack them. They won't be able to fight him, and if he attacks, things will be bad for them. But, of course, he was not added there just like that, so the pterosaur actually began to attack them. The hero was not very surprised by this and simply looked tired of this life. However, luck saved them, and the dinosaur decided to just collect the fruit and successfully did it. He wondered what would happen to the bird, and it immediately began to glow. Then, the silhouette of a man in the body of a pterosaur was visible. And then the pterosaur became fully human. He was naked and with a funny hairstyle. But in the end, he flew down. He didn't stay human for long, of course. But now it became clear to the boy why there are so many human bones below. Because the monsters ate them, fell, and killed themselves. Now, he didn't like this place very much, and he wanted to pick those fruits as soon as possible and leave here as soon as possible. But suddenly he saw something and froze in place. There was another huge monster on top of the mountain, staring at him. At the end, there was a pleasantness, and Lin Yuan, as a generous soul, shared a reptile kebab with the readers. And the monster was the bird of death. She was a mysterious and large bird. She was descended from the ancient beast, Yuzan, from classics of mountains and seas. The height was 65 meters and the weight was 130 tons. Mostly, her appearance meant death. The dragon did not understand what she was doing here and why she flew to them. One idea was that she could be the guardian of this tree. He glanced at the barbarian, asking why the bird was looking down and why it looked like it was mocking them. But the bird did not sit still and began to come closer and closer to them. The hero didn't even know what emotion to use and how to react to the fact that the bird was laughing at him. However, the bird did not stop staring at him. The hero decided that she was not planning to attack them yet. So the dragon spoke to her, greeted her, and said that his friend said that there was very tasty fruit there, and so he came. The girl looked at him askance for a moment. So he finally reached for them, warning that he would try them. The fruits glowed with yellow light, and he tried to get rid of the bird, saying that he did not need her help, that she would not be distracted, and that she would fly away and leave them alone. The bird of death was alarmed, thinking that he would eat the fruit now and how he would all fall down and die. She rose from her seat and spread her wings, thereby scaring Kui. The bird took flight from the top of the mountain and quickly flew down to them. So she almost dropped them, but the hero managed to jump back and stay on the mountain without falling. The bird was angry and upset. The girl was holding on to the dragon and he was worried about the bird and complained that she had a headache and hoped that they would be okay and tried to think of a plan. And after that, he asked Xiaokun to hold the fruit. Since Xiaokun could not hold it himself, he was asked to include fruits in his system because the hero was not very comfortable with them, which is logical in principle. He confirmed and asked if they needed to be analyzed, and then told him that he needed 100,000 evolution points, and Lin Yuan only had 93,330, which was not enough. The guy was in despair and started shouting that if he had known about this earlier, he would not have wasted his points, and shouted that the owner is busy now. A bird with a red look was already flying at him. The bird of death was already ready to attack and was near them. She scratched herself with her claws. With his back to the blood, tears appeared in his eyes and he gasped. Then their enemy flew away a little, giving them some time, but was preparing to attack them again. Suddenly, the bird realized that something was wrong and panicked a little. The dragon was already ready and beaming at her, and he commented that he was going to make a roast bird now. There was one problem that he forgot about, namely the recoil that his explosive breath had and made him nervous. Nevertheless, the bird almost managed to avoid the blow and looked very skeptical at all this. But there was a problem in the form of a burnt wing. And because of this, she began to quickly fly down. The hero looked at it completely calmly. However, he understood that his explosive breath did not scare the bird, which means that it would not help to defeat it. Therefore, the hero thought that it was necessary to hit from close range. The monster of death was able to put out the fire from the wing and flew up again. She flew to him, but he was just waiting for that. And he jumped on her back. She did not expect this and was pulled down a little. Sitting on her back, he opened his mouth wide. Now the poor bird had a dragon and a gorilla, though as small as a flea. And after that, the boy began to be very happy because he was able to saddle the bird and began to bite it sharply. She was already almost crying. Then the bird of death began to scream sharply, which was clearly not a good sign. After that, other birds began to fly to her, which was already quite bad for the heroes. She also began to rapidly fly down due to the fact that the heroes were significantly flattened and the girl could barely hold on. She flew so rapidly and quickly that everyone almost flew into space in a friendly company. But the hero, in principle, was not very upset, but on the contrary, said that it was all very cool. But in his past life, he had never flown on airplanes and did not think that becoming a monster, he would be able to ride on other monsters, feeling all the drive of flight. The bird kept trying to throw them both off its back, so after that it flew down again. At this point, Barbarian also flew down and barely caught hold of the dragon's leg, because she would have killed herself by falling to the ground in a little more. Later, she ended up on the boy's shoulder again, and he commented that the bird flew straight into the rock. He said that it was all madness and that he was shedding tears and snot. But down on the ground, a pecking tangerine was already waiting for them. That the mandarin brought a letter of apology. The monster of death was now flying towards the rock and straight to the tree with the magic fruit that made this all happen. Kui was looking somewhere to the side at something. As it turned out, there was a lake there which he had not noticed before. Now he had an idea, which was that if he chose the right moment, he would be able to use explosive breath and jump into the lake. Because he now had rough skin and there was no way he was going to crash to death. The hero told the bird that she was not the only one here who was trying and began to activate her breathing, and that her mother had not taught her not to incur the wrath of honest people. The girl closed her eyes, hoping for the best. So he began to gather energy and prepare to attack his enemy. So he did, and breathed his explosive breath on her, pushing her away from him. As a result, they flew in different directions, so we can say that his plan worked. and he and the girl flew backwards into the same lake. The girl, who was smaller and in even worse shape than him, began to scream and hold on to him with all her might. After a short moment, which seemed to last an eternity, they splashed into the water. As a result, the bird got a burnt and bare back and flew into a rock, not having time to turn away from it. Since she stopped near the tree, a lot of fruit also flew down from the tree. Well, she herself also got confused and could not stand or fly again. And she quickly flew down, clinging to the mountain of bones that was below. And the dragon and the girl jumped out of the water, and most importantly, they were alive, which was already a plus, and they breathed a sigh of relief. Quay stared blankly at the bird, which was buried on top of the bones that were falling in different directions. Then he started yelling that they had fried chicken for dinner tonight and that they had won and was really happy about it. But while he was rejoicing with his mouth open, a fruit got there, the same one that caused them so many problems. Then that fruit in the form of a mushroom began to fall further inside the monster. He realized something was wrong and wondered what had just gone into his mouth, coughed a little and rubbed his chest. But our genius quickly understood what it was and began to panic, while the girl still did not understand for sure what was happening. However, the hero had already begun to transform and became brown, and shouted that he did not want to transform and become smaller now. It was already visible that he had normal hands and appearance, and everything else characteristic of a person. His tail also began to disappear. He even surprised himself that he became like this after his transformation, namely a muscular but too blonde young man. Also at this moment, he was hovering above the water and carefully looking at himself, saying that he has such connections, which means he should definitely be pumped up and therefore handsome. It turned out that his tail did not disappear completely and left a small tip, and this worried him a little, because to him it looked like a pig's piglet, and he did not like it very much. The girl looked at him skeptically. Later, the boy calmed down and thought that when the system finished the analysis, he would be able to return to his previous form and was looking at the bird. The only problem was that he didn't know for sure that the bird was dead, because in general it would be very difficult and dangerous for him to walk around like this. But he really needed points, so if he could eat them, he would be able to score them. Suddenly, a sound was heard near the bird, and it was a skull rolling down. It was a sign for him that the bird did not die after all. It was terrible, and he almost choked in the water with water. The bird had already completely begun to rise from there, although it was weak after all this. Also held a corpse in her beak. The boy noticed this and wondered why she did that. Then the bird twisted it and threw it away, and she herself kept the pebble that was there. And after that, she ate the same crystal, and the wounds on her body began to heal quickly. After that, the bird stood up and spread its huge long wings. But after that, she flew away from there in the other direction, which was still pleasing, because at least he was not killed. Nevertheless, he was still upset because he wanted to fry the bird and eat it, but he couldn't do it. Then they both started swimming, hoping to find some place to hide or some small monsters that he could eat and score points. Even if he didn't succeed, he could just eat a few corpses and score enough points. In his head, he regretted that he had never had time to eat a piece of the bird's back, because that would have taken these problems away from him. Both of them had already climbed out of the water, and the girl shouted to him that there was danger and that he should be careful. It was the same imperial crocodile that they had met many times in the past, and he was already preparing to bite off the boy's head, opening his giant mouth wide. The crocodile closed its mouth, but the boy managed to jump back in time and now complained that it was an unprofessional attack and that it is not cultural to attack from behind. Other crocodiles have already begun to approach him. However, the boy kept an optimistic mood and even joked. But he understood that with such a body, he would not be able to save himself very much, and most likely, he would be eaten. He started moving fast and yelling that he didn't want to die and still wanted to become a monster again. Therefore, in a panic, he began to weave very quickly from there. But he remembered that he was once told that at a critical and dangerous moment, a person has hidden abilities that he had no idea about, and as it turned out, it was true. It was checked by him. It's good that he can swim at all. But on the way of his escape, one of the huge crocodiles stood in front of him and blocked his passage. The boy understood that it was a cunning attack because they attacked simultaneously from the front and the back. In the end, he decided that whatever will happen, he jumped on the same crocodile and hoped for the best. Even the crocodile was shocked by such audacity. He did not expect such a thing. The boy grabbed the crocodile's jaw and held it closed, and also the explanation that they had strong lower jaw muscles, with the help of which they could easily crush bones. But other muscles there were weak. Because of this, they could not open their mouth wide. Therefore, an adult could hold their mouth closed with their own hands. The hero was smart, so he actually knew all this and did not want his opponent to think that he was weak only because of his new appearance and that his brain was still working. But unfortunately, something did not go according to his plan, and he realized it very quickly. Namely, that the crocodile began to spin around its axis with the young man on its jaw. Lin Yuan couldn't do anything because if he let go, the crocodile would eat him in an instant, and that was not on his wish list. However, if he did not let go, the crocodiles that were behind him would catch up and eat him as well. No way out. Suddenly, the hero heard a cry that was intended for him. Namely, he was being told to grab something. He also looked up. There was a girl yelling for him to grab a vine she was throwing at him. The crocodile looked at it all angrily. Lin Yuan obeyed, released his jaw, which he held tightly, and reached for the vine. But he was quickly pulled away just before his enemy could bite off his legs. The other imperial species also started jumping to try to grab him, but he had already flown, and it was too late. So far, he was holding on with only one hand. It's good that he didn't fly off at least. But the girl did all this very professionally, which is not surprising considering her gorilla nature. So, as a result, she comfortably fell on two legs, but the boy was less lucky because he fell on his back and head. Then, she began to beat herself on the chest out of habit. And he commented that he was saved by the girlfriend of a Tarzan cosplayer. However, even though they were already on land, it did not save them much because the same monsters came after them again. One of them crashed into a tree. And Lin Yuan was shocked that they were such master predators if they could do such tricks. He said this while running away. When suddenly the girl stopped and screamed, something was clearly wrong, since she looked from behind them, but the boy quickly took her by the hand and pulled her further, telling her not to scream, that this is not the best time for this, and now she is a little girl, so they should run away immediately. And then he continued to shout for her to move and not to stand still as if she was stuck. She had no choice, so she moved a little behind him and he helped her. Then he shouted, not understanding why the crocodiles hate them so much and whether it is because they have eaten so many of their kind. And he also complained that now his legs are small and he cannot run away from their enemy. Xiao Kun appeared, who started mocking the hero, saying that when he became so small. Lin Yuan didn't appreciate the joke and yelled for him to close the bag. And after that I started asking him for help and whether he can take the points on credit and now become a monster again. He said this almost crying. But he received a negative answer, and that Xiao Kun, Ben Kun adheres to his principles and will not do such a thing. The boy has already started to cry and beg for him to help him, because he understands and respects his rules and principles. But that's why you need to understand him if Xiao Kun doesn't want to see his master eaten alive. And he continued to explain his situation, that he can't find monsters that he could eat right now, and that the situation is very difficult, and that's why you need to open your heart and help him in such a difficult time. But the companion didn't give up and said that he didn't care in principle, so it was every man for himself. Lin Yuan was furious at this. Then the hero said that he doesn't even see that he is completely naked and screams to be eaten. Xiao Kun laughed and said that he could give him the skin for free. And in a moment he was in a fashionable jacket with spikes and a girl was running behind him. Suddenly, the girl overtook him and began to quickly climb a tree. The guy looked at it and realized that the girl is not stupid, and that means she knows how to use her strengths correctly. She looked back at him and told him to come to her. But he replied that he could not, because in his past life he was most afraid of climbing trees. Nevertheless, he had no choice, so he said that everything was fine with him and gathered his strength. He barely managed to avoid his legs bitten off by a crocodile. He had excellent timing. The girl had long since climbed up and was looking at him as if he was some strange person, while he was screaming and trying to climb the tree. His thoughts on the account of all this were such that it was a strange feeling for him and clearly not stimulation when getting into a difficult and dangerous situation. But it was a long time ago, because in the past life, even using all his strength, he could not pull himself up even once. And now he was able to climb a tree. And now, when he still took the form of a man, he had several times more strength than in his past life. So, now he was quite good at climbing the tree and had already caught up with the girl. The crocodile looked at them with fury but could not do anything. Although he had an idea, and this idea was that he ran into the tree with all his might. Because of this, the boy's leg sprained and he was a little unprepared for this, because after the leg, he all began to fall right in front of the crocodile, which he was just waiting for. But somehow the girl managed to grab his hand and detain him. She held him and told him he was full of bullshit and looked at him like he was bullshit. But the guy didn't care, because he was just glad that she helped him and he didn't fall into the crocodiles. However, he still did not like the scathing expression of his savior's face. He again grabbed the tree himself and they both began to climb it further. The girl was in front.
Later, they ended up on a branch and it was clear that it was not very difficult for the girl to do all this, unlike the boy who barely climbed up.
The girl was just sitting there and the guy was lying down and breathing, gaining strength. And the crocodiles looked up angrily, but they did not give up, continuing to climb the tree trying to throw them off. By nature, the hero was the one who showed up the most when he was out of danger. So he began to make fun of the crocodiles, who for a moment almost ate him, saying that they were so small and wanted to eat such a huge tree and that they would fail. The heroine looked at him in surprise. And then she came even closer, and even later they looked at him. He already noticed it and asked if everything is okay, and if she wants to say something, let her say it. She spoke with a smile, asking if he wanted to practice with her. He immediately got angry and asked if she wanted to fight with him. Then he asked if she was sure of her decision, but the girl was already very ready and even grabbed his hands. She pushed him aside with a malicious smile, while he shouted that now is not the time to quarrel and we should live peacefully. The barbarian began to beat herself on the chest, and the boy looked in surprise at what was in front of them. As it turned out, it was a giant snake. The information about it was as follows: a prehistoric giant python, 70 meters long, 5 meters thick, and weighing 70 tons. Despite this, she was not poisonous, liked to climb and hide in trees, and attack prey from her hiding place. And right now, I was in front of two heroes who had just gotten rid of some enemies, and here you are. It was very bad for both of them. Python looked at them very angrily, and the hero panicked and asked the system if the compass was really good, and why it did not remind him of the danger and enemies stronger than him. He turned away and jokingly, nervously, said that why is this python attacking them, if he has not yet eaten one? However, the snake was not very interested in what was being said to her and quickly swung her tail, almost knocking them both down. Then the girl grabbed the boy's hand and began to pull him behind her, saying that they should run away. Then she let him go and began to jump from branch to branch, while the boy stood still and did not know what to do, because he did not know how. Nevertheless, he tried to do it and jumped, simultaneously asking the systems if he could be given the fruit of transformation. And the snake quickly caught up with them. The hero ran away and said that he would like to throw a fruit into the monster's mouth so that he would become a man and fall down. Xiao Kun appeared and said that it required 100,000 evolution points and showed the check. This option did not suit Lin Yuan because he did not have that many points. But he began to ask just like that to give him that fruit, not knowing for sure whether he was joking or not about that amount. But Xiao Kun didn't give up and said that if the boy didn't pay, he wouldn't get anything. And the points were needed for the synthesis, and it was still necessary to wait for it to end. Here he realized that even if he had points, it still would not help him much. The guy was desperate and said that the system has too many problems and bugs. The system just turned around, but he began to threaten to write a bad review and in general that he was waiting for his death. But the girl's situation was not much better because although she jumped and could do it freely, a snake attacked her, making her fly down. But while she was falling, she was almost eaten, opening her mouth wide. She covered herself, protecting herself with her hands, but it did not help much. The guy quickly found himself next to her and shouted to her to be careful and pushed her away, and he himself got into her place. The girl wanted to deny something, but did not have time and just watched sadly as she flew away from there. She flew, but the boy was still eaten by a snake, terribly. So the boy was in the belly of the family but still alive, which was already a plus. When he opened his eyes and at first did not understand where he was and looked around, it stank and was incredibly nasty. Then the boy realized that he was in the stomach of a python and that he had been eaten. But fortunately for him, the effect of gastric juice began to act later and not immediately, or it could be due to his good physical training. Nevertheless, it was still very risky. Therefore, if he stayed there for a long time, his body would sooner or later eat away, so it was necessary to find a way to get out of there. And for this, he had one idea, which was that after he became a human, he did not check his ability to use previous skills. That's why he wanted to test his, and it even started to work, which meant that he could easily get out of there and escape. Suddenly, Xiao-kun spoke and began to ask the boy to stop, because if he continues to generate energy, he will die immediately. Due to the fact that in human form and in the body of a thunder dragon, he has a different structure and density of the body, which means that until that person he cannot resist such a strong force. But the boy did not stop, and he continued that he would not be able to breathe, and instead his ability to bite and swallow would improve. Therefore, explosive breath was changed to explosive bite. Lin Yuan decided to clarify and asked if this meant that if he ate the internal organs of this python now, he would gain evolution points, because then it would solve his problems with a vanishing number of points. Therefore, he decided to take a risk, and although he was very disgusted, he could force himself to eat a few bites. To the taste, it was like he was chewing smelly socks that hadn't been washed for a long time, and after that, he immediately felt sick. I can't blame him for that. But what pleased him was that after eating a few more such bites, he could completely cover the insufficient number of points. It gave him energy, so he started eating that python from the middle and was awarded 160 points, which wasn't bad. His teeth were sharp, so he was good at everything. And at some point, the snake also felt that something was clearly wrong, and with tears in its eyes, it began to fall due to pain. Because of this, the boy also started to fall and cursed the python because of it. But this did not stop Lin Yuan, and he continued to bite his stomach, perhaps even more furiously than before. However, at one point he noticed something and looked the other way, and that was exactly what he thought the python was trying to spit out. And it was too early for that. Nevertheless, this raised his ego even more, and he began to mock the snake for the fact that it is really so bad and that the snake itself threw him here. And now you want to throw him out, and he will not give up so easily. Xiao-kun had already told the good news that the boy now had 100,090 points and asked if he wanted to buy the transformation fruit. The young man was happy and replied that he wanted to. Thus began the synthesis of the fruit of the transformation. At the moment, the process was 1%, and according to the system's calculations, it would take another 30 minutes. It could have been worse. But the hero got angry and began to argue unsatisfiedly about why the process takes so much time and whether he could speed up the process. He replied that he could speed it up by 20% for every 1,000 points. The boy got very angry and started pulling Xiao-kun's cheeks and saying that you shouldn't be so confused at the balls. But it was quickly explained to him that for him it is like fuel, and without points he will stop working altogether. Then the second stage appeared in him, namely despair and tears. He said that the system is simply terrible and the snake tastes the same, and that Xiao-kun is the devil because of what makes him eat it. But the points were dripping. In the end, he accelerated the process to 25, then he got no points again. And he sighed heavily. And everything happened again. He went on to eat that unfortunate snake from the middle. I don't know how it is still alive. Just as he said this, the snake convulsed in pain, thereby scaring all the crocodiles around, who began to flee in panic. But finally, this long-awaited synthesis ended, the moment the hero was waiting for so much. He also got a notification asking if he wanted the fruit right now. He said yes, with tears of joy. And finally, they got him that unfortunate fruit from the picture. Everything around him was shining. True, now the fruit was green, and the boy understood that it was because red transforms the body and green saves life. The young man immediately began to eat it and said that it was tasty, but a little bitter. However, in any case, I think it was tastier than the snake. He quickly ate it and threw away the bone, which, by the way, was quite large. Now, with a full stomach, He sat down and waited for the transformation, breathing a sigh of relief. And in a moment, he said that he wanted to transform and got into a very epic pose, almost like Sailor Moon. He stood there, a little energy around him, even his hair stood up. But after that, his transformation stopped, and he asked Xiao Kun why he didn't change and if he didn't deceive him with time. At this, he exhaled sadly and thought about what he had told about it a long time ago. However, he had no choice, so in a moment, he was already in a teacher's clothes and with a pointer. And he began to explain that when he analyzed the nature of the fruit, he found that it contained an energy that was not of this world. Therefore, this energy, after entering the monster's body, changes the center of the monster's life into a core the size of a human fist, which is why the monster becomes a person. Now, he has changed the energy of the fruit, and now the concentration of this energy should fit in, and now the hero should feel the crystal core in his body. But he needs to use his mind to destroy the crystal core and direct the energy from there into his limbs and bones, so he can become a monster. The young man began to doubt the veracity of all this and asked if it was all true, as it looked very suspicious. Also, it strongly reminded him of the situation from novels about martial arts, and he definitely saw something like that in them. Xiao Kun smiled and said that the truth is not a lie, but it is up to the boy to believe it or not. Lin Yuan sat down in a meditation posture and asked if he had to sit like that to find this crystal core, and how long would he have to do it? 7 days and 7 nights. He was told that all this is not very important, you just need to not think about anything. Close your eyes and feel. The hero did so and said that he would try his best. He began to feel his body well, as if he himself, as a child, was looking for this very crystal in his inner galaxy. This is how he found this crystal and was very happy that he was able to do it. Pepper had another problem, which was that he did not know how to break this crystal and how to direct the energy from it to his limbs. In his past life, in physical education class, his teacher made them throw a ball. This was to learn how to use the strength of the wrists and hands to the fullest. Therefore, he did not wonder if feeling the energy of this core is the same as feeling the strength of the muscles. By the way, in the same culture lesson, he somehow ended up in the women's group, but no one knows why. In his past life, he studied the theoretical part of the questions well. But when it came to practice, he had great failures. Therefore, instead of throwing the ball, it fell out of his hand before he could do anything with it. However, now he believed in himself and in his success. Now in this life he was strong, not that small and weak boy. The young man held his hands over the crystal and said that he could feel it. The hero was able to break the blue crystal and was happy to do so and marveled at how strange it felt. He succeeded, so now he really started to turn back into a monster like he wanted to from the beginning. Therefore, the belly of the snake, like itself, began to increase in size, and the girl who was sitting on a branch beat her chest while looking at this strange picture. The python felt completely sick, or rather, he was completely covered. And so it happened, because our beloved dragon got out of it and it broke. Seeing this, the girl was incredibly happy, glad that he was alive. Even the crocodiles were shocked by this and were generally afraid that the same fate awaited them. And now he stood straight and said that he was finally back, as always, a lucky boy. Now he was not afraid of those unfortunate crocodiles, but they were afraid of him. And now, who will mock whom? After killing all the crocodiles that were there. He commented that he didn't even expect this fruit to be so dangerous. But fortunately, he was almost a 4, so it was easier for him. And Lin Yuan promised himself that he would never become a human again because it was too scary. But all this time he was already used to being a monster and it was more comfortable for him. And he didn't even care that here he had a huge jaw, a round stomach, short arms and thick ribs. The main thing was that he was the king of all monsters. The girl was saying something, but she was too low and he couldn't hear her because he was roasting a crocodile. The girl screamed with all her might, asking why he had returned to his previous form. But the fact that now he looked much bigger than when she saw him in this form last time. He finally paid attention to her. He began to explain that he gets up early, goes to bed early, eats right. I'm a picky eater, that's why I'm tall. The boy did not want to tell her the truth about his secret and cheat. The girl was silent because it was clearly not the answer she expected. And the crocodiles calmly roasted themselves on a blue fire. Tangerine and Barbarian began to smell food and already wanted to eat, looking at how he cooks. He gave the smaller ones something to eat and began to do the same himself. The young man said that he really missed delicious food, especially after the python, and that you shouldn't throw it away, but it's better to cook it and eat it. He was also given a reward, namely one monster life fruit. Inside, this fruit was a strong source of life. By eating it, you could cure any injury, even a fatal one. Lin Yuan didn't quite believe it and began to ask if it was exactly like that. How much? It was more like a simple bitter gourd. Shokun, in the form of a teacher, began to explain that the fact that this fruit is similar to a pumpkin does not mean anything and that pumpkins are not so bad in general. They have a lot of protein, fiber, amino acids, and many other minerals and carbohydrates. It can relieve heat, detoxify, fatigue, clear the mind, improve vision. And let's finish with the fact that the guy does not understand food at all. The hero told him not to blow his brains. Ta said that Xiaokun should know very well that he hates bitter gourd the most. And he doesn't care if it's the fruit of life or not, but he's not going to eat it. But he was sorry to throw it away, so he looked at the girl. But he thought about what would be better to give her, especially since her breasts had not yet healed. So the boy gave her this fruit with a smile and told her to try it. She didn't quite understand why. The barbarian took it and began to eat it quickly and deliciously. She was not picky. Then the girl stopped, and the juice from the fruit flowed on her chin and down. But there was one problem, which was that she became very sick after she tried this very fruit. The girl turned blue and shook. This pumpkin-like fruit was too bitter for her, causing her to fall to her knees and struggle to catch her breath. But still, he did his job. So now her wound didn't hurt, which was already a plus. And after it stopped hurting, it completely disappeared. The boy was surprised at how well this thing treated, and the girl was delighted and quickly ate it, not caring about the taste. After eating, the girl joyfully began to beat her chest and said that now she was full of strength and was very happy. The guy bent down a little and said that her wound had just healed and it would be better not to beat her chest so hard and scream. But he noticed that if she hadn't been rubbing herself in her chest forever, the wound would have healed a long time ago. She replied that she was used to hitting herself in the chest when she saw a monster, and if she was lucky, she could get rid of an unwanted attack that way. But she looked confused. The boy replied that there was no need to fight with anyone now, and after that, he decided to ask why she attacked when they first met and beat her so badly. Varvara replied that it was because he waved his hand, and then she explained that for her, it meant something like, "Take my food and I give up." The hero covered his eyes with his paw and admitted to her that he was wrong, but it was about not having intellectual conversations with her. The girl continued to eat, but said that at least because of the issue of territory or food, but she would have to fight, and there were problems here. Lin Yuan said that this was indeed the case, and her shouting would not help here. And he continued that the world of monsters is not so bad, rough, but simple, and if you follow the rules, you can avoid many problems. And also thought about whether everyone will know that he is the strongest if he roars loudly. Then I thought about my explosive breath and that it would definitely show who was the coolest. The girl introduced it, but remained silent. He continued to eat, saying that the girl needed to eat more and then he would help her become a barbarian monkey again. He also asked his sister how he addressed her about the bird of death, which almost killed them, and wondered how she was able to eat the fruit, avoid meeting it, but at the same time was captured by the reptiles. The heroine began to explain that at first she just wanted to eat, and because of that, she decided to pick some fruit that was not far away. The boy had already begun to imagine how she turned from a gorilla into a naked girl, and the ram continued his story. Then she realized that he was thinking about something wrong and got angry with him, and at the same time threw a bone directly at his head. Then she barely managed to grab onto a stone to keep from falling. At the same time, reptiles began to fly from the other side, and she just looked at it. However, these reptiles began to attack the bird of death in some cave. She was not far away and saw their struggle. It seemed to her that the reptiles were winning because the bird's head was already almost bald, which did not mean anything good. The boy was surprised that these reptiles even mocked the bird. And then I thought that the enemy of the enemy is the best friend and that maybe they should establish contact with her in the future. For a while, she sat and quietly watched it from her hiding place. In the end, the bird was able to free itself and flew away, dropping the reptiles that were still on it along the way. But instead, they were able to grab her and stuck her to the stone with their slime and were satisfied with that. The dragon summed it all up with the fact that the girl fell off a cliff into a cave, where she was eaten by reptiles. However, he was surprised that they did not immediately eat it. The heroine began to explain that they left her probably because they wanted to sacrifice her to the king of these reptiles. He was shocked and said that maybe this king wanted to make her his wife. The girl curled up in a ball and was upset. The barbarian began to tell that this island was once very beautiful. She had a family, her father, mother, and she. It was a family in which it was difficult to understand where the man was, where the woman was, and where the children were. But at some point, these rotten reptiles, they destroyed all the vegetation on the island, destroyed the land. In other words, they destroyed all the vitality of the island. Lin Yuan now realized that now it was no wonder that there was nothing near that cave and everything was dark and gloomy. Her parents and several uncles and aunts joined together. They found the lair of these reptiles and went to defeat their king. They said goodbye, but never returned. When the girl grew up, she decided to continue the work of her parents, namely to protect the island. And she also wanted to find their lair and find her parents. The heroine thought that they had the same smell as hers, so she wanted to take their trail in this way. The monkey was crying, and the hero tried to calm her and said that now she is not alone, and he is like her brother, and brothers should fulfill the wishes of their sisters. He said that the island is his second home, and he will not allow it to be destroyed so easily. But he began to imagine the king of reptiles, and to think that defeating him would certainly not be so easy. That's why he said that he needs to speed up the leveling, and he is forced to become a 100-meter monster. When that happens, he will go fight the king of reptiles and deal with him. Then there was a day, and the hero was going somewhere, but he noticed something on the way. And it was the spiny jackals. Their length was from 5 to 15 meters, weight from 30 to 50 tons. They were cruel, angry, agile, and had a very strong bite force. Jackals lived in groups and had hard and sharp spines on their spines, which were visible from the outside. The dragon did not understand where they came from. These same jackals attacked the ground sloth. It was 35 meters long and weighed 105 tons. And while he easily fought off the attackers and calmly pushed them away from him, they did not give up. The boy was able to catch one of the jackals from his hiding place while the sloth was throwing them away. Because they flew in great numbers and in different directions, although some of them managed to bite him. Lin Yuan didn't take much part in this and thought that if the two sides lost, then he wouldn't have to interfere and he would just eat them and cheered for the sloth. He was also given 250 evolution points. In the end, the sloth began to lose little by little because they managed to bite him, but the jackals did not much less. However, suddenly the sloth began to throw off all the jackals and looked somewhere directly. The boy understood that something was not clean because he was looking at him, and this was not a good sign. He had already managed to start running at him, and with incredible speed, and it would be difficult to stop him. Linivets did not plan to stop, but the dragon decided that he needed to stop and stopped him with his tail, which his opponent clearly did not expect. Therefore, he crashed into the ground with all his might, head first. And then the hero, holding it with one paw, began to tear off its fur and skin, which he was not happy about. Then he said that his meat was delicious, and for it he was given as many as 500 evolution points. Therefore, he continued to eat it with appetite, but they came to visit him. Namely, the jackals who survived the sloth, who did not look very good and scowled viciously. But at some point, she began to jump on the back of the hero, who did not blink an eye, did not see them, and continued to eat. But then he realized that something was wrong and quickly turned around. He himself was covered in blood and his eyes glowed red. The hero was able to quickly grab the jackal in his mouth. And then, just like that, he bit him in two, looking angry and emotionless. He looked even more mad after that, but shouted that he was given a lot of evolution points for it, which wasn't bad at all. Others continued to attack him, not realizing that this was not a very good idea for them. They all shouted and got into fighting positions. While attacking, they jumped on the boy, and he fought back and did not care much. He calmly bit them and had no problems with it. He could defeat others with just a wave of his tail, cut them in two, get a paw on others and also crush them. By the way, the girl was also a hero and was shaking with fear because the jackals were crawling up to her. Suddenly, she shouted that she would not let them take her food while the enemy had already opened his mouth. Later, the same jackal grabbed the guy by the shoulder, but he managed to take the girl from there in his arms from the shoulder. Nevertheless, that jackal bit him painfully. Lin Yuan became very emotional and told the barbarian that she was so small and still protected him and that she didn't need to help him. But he started to activate it himself, explosive breathing. By causing spikes to grow on his spine, he was able to stab or knock back those on his back. But as a result, everyone got hit and could no longer attack. The living were simply bored, watched as he ate their brothers and sisters and kept at a distance. Then they all started screaming together, looking up at the sky. The dragon continued to eat and asked if it was because of grief that they could not defeat him that they began to howl at him. But in general, he was not very interested in it. But he needed a lot of evolution points and joked that it was free food delivery, and he approved. Through all these howls came their boss or king, who was considerably larger than the others and was to be a more serious opponent. Lin Yuan also understood that it was some kind of leader, but he thought that he would be given more points and did not mind much. Moreover, the compass showed that it was just a golden find. The boy thought for a while and decided that he still had food, but his bones were definitely hard and hard to chew. And, as a sign of respect, he began to eat in front of the jackal and promised that he would deal with him later. The huge jackal did not appreciate such manners and respect, so he wondered why the jackal continued to eat and ignore him. Therefore, without thinking long, he began to attack the dragon from his previous position. With this, he got angry with him, saying that he was just food and he had no right to screw up like that, and he would have given him at least his last meal if he wanted to eat with him. Then Lin Yuan opened the rotya so wide that it startled the unfortunate jackal, who jumped back in panic and fear. Later, he grabbed another, smaller one and told him not to disturb him and to get away from him. The bigger one was already too scared, so he came up with a good idea, namely to knock down from there quietly and as quickly as possible while Lin Yuan ate and got his points. Still, he was angry that Kui didn't take him seriously and scowled. As it turned out, he doesn't think well. That's why he went on the attack, even quietly, thinking that he could take that life away. But unfortunately for the jackal, the hero suddenly rose up and it hit his spine. Kui was happy that he was able to accumulate 100,000 evolution points. Now he could continue the conversion process and put the remaining ones into the fill indicator to speed up the process. So the synthesis of the fruit began. It remained to wait 18 minutes. But suddenly the monkey looked at the girl and got worried. He wasn't sure that she would be able to hold out that long, as she didn't look very well, and there didn't seem to be any food around that the boy could eat. Kui stood up and began cursing the jackals for taking so much of his precious time, which was now worth its weight in gold, among other things. Therefore the last option remained, namely a huge jackal, which was standing directly behind him and was angry. The dragon quickly turned and said that he would have to take it and use it to replenish his supply of evolution points. Before the jackal had time to peck, the blue tail already knocked him off his feet and destroyed all the plans he had. Then he quickly took it into his mouth. The jackal understood his problem and had tears in his eyes, but he had a chance, and he missed it. So he himself is to blame. His whining wouldn't save him now. Kui began to spin it from side to side and then threw it somewhere forward. His opponent could barely stand up and was breathing heavily. He was badly wounded and bleeding from his back. But, with probably the last of his strength, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Lin Yuan also remembered that the monkey girl had said that fighting for food and territory was a common thing for them. Therefore, after that, he began to run at him so that he would not interfere with his gourmet food. Jackal was clearly not happy with what was happening to him now. And from the blow, he flew even further. Of course, his life beat him like that. But what can you do? He continued to scowl. I can't blame him. It was all he could do in this situation. But the hero began to gather strength for his signature explosive breath. Everything went well and he started to glow. Especially the eyes and the mouth itself. Here, the jackal realized that everything was completely bad and froze in place, nervous. And as a result, he released a beam of light directly at his opponent. The jackal all began to burn with blue fire, but he flew even further into the forest near which they were. All the other residents were probably delighted. Nevertheless, the jackal did not die, but all his fur was simply burned and he was completely naked, but alive, of course. But immediately after that, he got upset and started hiding everything, nervous as if they were not all beasts there. After that, he sobbed, crying at the same time. His other brothers heard it. But everyone came to the defense of their leader and stood before him angrily, guarding. The dragon smiled lightly and asked if they had decided to team up to protect their king. But they had done him a great service, as he now had plenty of food, almost a supply. But suddenly he realized that someone was still howling, but he did not understand who and where. As it turned out, it was a new character who had a sword and a gorgeous blonde mane. As it turned out, it was a wolf, a general. A giant wolf that had an alien origin from the beast Volk-Chi, which was described in the Classic of Mountains and Seas. It is 50 meters long and weighs 150 tons. Here, even the hero was in shock, not understanding whether he was a master of martial arts or what it was. He did not understand why his opponent had a sword, and understood that things were going worse than he expected. The jackals looked tired and did almost nothing, but the new one looked strong and stood straight. The boy decided that it was better not to look at him from afar. It was not some spiked jackal, but it was the same size as him. And he didn't know how bad things would end for him if he started using his sword. The girl was only getting worse and worse, so it was necessary to act quickly. Also, the boy did not understand why he was looking so hard at the monkey girl. But was he up to something, or did he just want to eat her? However, he did not have time to think much about it, as he was already running towards him with all his legs. The hero did not understand why he immediately ran to the girl. It was very strange that at the first appearance he was staring at her, that now he began to attack. Lin Yuan fought back easily and asked why he was carrying a sword at all if he didn't use it at all. But in a moment the wolf's scratches appeared in the boy's eyes. But by then it was already too late. And in a moment he was already screaming in pain, and the wolf quietly left while the boy's face was bleeding. Kui realized that this was a sneaky plan from the start. The wolf wanted him to think he was going to attack the girl and, as a result, wanted to attack his eyes. So it was all just a maneuver. While the boy was thinking, his opponent was running in the other direction, but he clearly already had some kind of plan, which consisted in the fact that in a moment he quickly changed his direction and started running towards our heroes again. And jumping high, he could easily reach the unfortunate girl who was lying and almost unable to move. Now, Lin Yuan realized that this was no longer a trick, and now the monster really wanted to attack the monkey. He realized what a bad place the hero had and attacked them both at the same time. Fortunately, the boy was able to cover the girl, and the dog flew past. Kui didn't understand what kind of brawler he was. He understood that his enemy's strategies were far superior, as was his intelligence, but action was still required. So the hero began to rush by, telling the enemy that he was just a curly animal, and he actively attacked in response. Then he said that he is the king and master of this island, and therefore he should listen to him. After all these words, the boy used his tail to make the bones fly at the wolf in the certain hope of stopping him. But, unfortunately for him, the wolf turned out to be tougher and did not fall into this trap. And then Kui began to prepare his explosive breath, telling him to look at him. His opponent sensed that something was not clean in all this. But he was smart enough to remember what happened to the jackal because of that breath and was on guard. Lin Yuan released his explosive breath in the direction where his opponent was. But the wolf was already very agile and did not give in to this either, jumping back at the right moment. Therefore, as a result, he only had slightly burnt paws, but he clearly survived it better than others. But he got into a combat position. The dragon looked at him with a smile and said that they were still tied. The wolf did not plan to give up, so he quickly jumped to the tree and then directly to the hero. The dragon didn't expect this, so he just stared at it with his mouth open in surprise. But the wolf was not going to play, so he began to take out his sword from his back. This was the beginning of a terrible change. Here the hero was greatly surprised that he would really use the sword, because he thought it was just an accessory. His opponent first rose on his hind legs, then lowered himself, swinging his sword. That's how he was able to injure the dinosaur. Hitting his arm until it bled, the hero was unable to defend himself. After the attack, his opponent carefully considered what to do next and continued to hold the sword in his mouth. Because, well, what else? Lin Yuan understood that things were bad, and his wounds were bleeding profusely and very deep. But, fortunately, the injured hand was where the girl was not. Then he spoke to the wolf and said that it must be convenient for him to fight with a sword, but he has bare hands. He didn't like the fact that his opponent had more advantages and no risks, and he already imagined how his head was chopped off with a sword. Later, he made a great decision, namely to run away from there, saying that everything is terrible, unfair, and there is no logic here. But he remembered how in the past, he thought that becoming a monster he would not be afraid of anything, and hear a little more, and he would be butchered like a pig. Not in the middle of his retreat, he remembered that he was somehow a ruler and could not run away so easily, because the enemy had weapons. And besides, the boy had to save his sister, a monkey. If he wanted her to go back to being a monkey barbarian, then he had to hurry. And if two of them fight, they will definitely win easily. The dragon took her by the two hands and began to say that while he should protect, she should listen carefully while she is in a disadvantageous situation. The girl nodded lightly. He put her on a tree and told her to wait patiently for him there. Meanwhile, the wolf did not retreat and was already flying towards them. Therefore, during the time that they were both talking, the enemy managed to strike at the leg and tail. Kui was trying to pull a tree out of the ground to get some weapons while the girl was climbing higher up. The guy was still able to pull out the tree and had a definite plan of what to do with it. Therefore, immediately after that, he threw that tree at the wolf and told him not to think that only he himself could use a weapon. But this did not stop his enemy because he was able to defend himself from him and cut that tree. The wolf was distracted by this, and Lin Yuan was just waiting for this and began to activate his explosive breath to the full, for which the time had come. The canine person noticed this, but a little late, due to the fact that he was distracted before that. The wolf went into berserk mode and stood on its hind legs, not looking too embarrassed. He did a somersault and prepared to get into a fighting stance. The hero realized that his skin was too rough and thick. Because of this, his breath could not penetrate him. But such skills were not unusual for the boss. There was one more question that bothered him, and that was why, even with such a strong blow, he did not let go of the sword from his mouth. This boss's sword was quite sharp and dealt a lot of damage, more than claws or teeth. Therefore, the boy thought about a way to make him drop this sword. He stood more firmly on the ground and said that he had an idea for such a case, which was that if he landed another critical hit, it would force him to drop that sword from his teeth. So he began to accelerate and run at him. But how to my displeasure, one of the jackals came up from behind and opened his mouth wide in readiness to bite, leg with all his might. The boy looked at the jackal, and meanwhile, the wolf was already in the air, jumping at him. But in a moment, he was next to the boy with the sword in his mouth before the attack. The hero was shocked that those two thought of teaming up against him. He managed to dodge the blow, but still cursed the wolf for having the sword that had caused him so much trouble, and now the jackal that was biting hard at his legs. Now he was attacked from both sides, from the front and from the rear. He didn't even have a place to retreat, and by this time he was already covered in scars. Then he shouted that 2 for 1 is not fair. And that is, they did not have the honor of masters of martial arts, because it was vile and treacherous. A bird which, moreover, was not alone, was watching from above this picture. It was a flock of birds, and death already known to us. All of them were flying somewhere, but one was looking at them and their carnage. And then this bird focused its gaze on the girl, who was sitting in a ball on a tree branch and was looking intently at it. After that, she began to smile compulsively and rejoiced that she had found a monkey. Realizing this, she began to fly towards her sharply. The monkey saw this and was clearly not happy about this course of events because there will be a cover if she is caught, and the girl did not have the strength to run away. Fortunately, the hero noticed in time that something was wrong and did not understand that the bird was forgotten at all and realized that the little sister was in danger. The girl tried to hide somewhere among the greenery and not make a sound, but the bird was able to find her quickly. The dragon yelled at her and panicked a bit about it all. However, immediately after that, he was simultaneously attacked by a jackal and a wolf, and he screamed. When his enemies came, he was very worried about the monkey. In his past life, he had no friends at all, namely those who were ready to risk their lives for him. By this time, he was very used to the girl and could not allow anything bad to happen to her, let alone death. The dragon wanted to protect her because he saw her as his younger sister and promised that he would fulfill her wish, so he quickly ran to her defense. But the wolf had other plans for him and continued to attack, growling. And with his attack, he cut through Lin Yuan, forcing him to stop. The boy looked at the sword sticking out of his chest and he was covered in blood, which was clearly not a good situation for him. They kept up with the boy and continued to bite, not feeling sorry at all. They should at least have a conscience. They bit his leg and shoulder. Now he frowned and did not move, standing still. But it didn't last long, and soon his back started to glow, and the genius wolf was the first to notice it, of course. Now he could not pull the sword out of the dragon's body and became very nervous, foggy, and did not know what to do. Kuei became angry, clenched his teeth and said that they finally got it after all this time. He quickly grew giant spikes that were able to injure his main opponent. And after that, he began to explain that he was specifically showing them his weak points, and until they hit his heart, nothing will happen to him. But the wolf himself will no longer be able to pull out the sword because it is difficult to do so. 17 years of his training were not in vain. The rest of the spikes slammed into the wolf's back and threw him off the boy's back, and the enemy flew far away and clattered to the ground. Now the dragon looked angrily at the jackal and said that it remained only to deal with him. He was very nervous, but continued to hold on to the leg, and he bit. Lin Yuan hoped that this would give him many evolution points. So the jackal was finally eaten, and he was indeed given a lot of evolution points for all his efforts to eat him. Also, he increased the synthesis progress to 67% and then to 89%. His other adversary stood behind him and was as quiet as a mouse watching his fellows being eaten. Xiao Kun suddenly appeared and asked if he wanted to get the fruit. He affirmed that he wanted to. And in a moment he was holding a green small fruit in his hands. After that, Lin Yuan quickly and forcefully threw it to the monkey and told it to eat it. He was able to. The bird just completely opened the girl's hiding place and was happy that she was able to do it. The girl crawled to take the fruit that was thrown to her. She was able to do this and began to eat it quickly and with appetite. The bird was already above her with its mouth open, ready to eat her, but the girl closed her eyes and continued eating. The dragon yelled for her to hurry up and do as he taught her. She didn't have much time and she needed to transform already or it would be over. She opened her eyes sharply and was looking somewhere. She sat down so that she could see the bird and reached out to her with her hand, which still looked the same as before. The bird mockingly looked at it and did not even hurry too much to eat it. But suddenly, the girl's hand grew significantly and easily slapped the bird in the face. The only problem was that so far, only the palm and a little of the hand itself had grown. However, it still made the bird turn its head in the other direction and at least bought it time. Now the girl has fully grown and looks like she did before this whole story, namely the gorilla barbarian, one of the biggest monsters of the island. The girl's palm was even imprinted on the bird's face, I must say fully deserved, considering that she wanted to eat it. The bird even drove with its head on the ground for several kilometers before it was able to stop. The girl finally saw that she had become the way she was before. At least she was big again, and she could also speak now. The gorilla began to look at herself from different angles and was incredibly happy that she had become the way she was before all this. The guy approached her and said that the enemy of the enemy is his friend and maybe he needs to negotiate with the bird. She replied that he should wait and that if he wants to negotiate and become friends, then she will go first and take the initiative and talk to her herself. She suddenly jumped to the bird of death. The monkey landed on her back, which she was not happy about. I'm sure that her back, at least, cracked because her eyes popped out of their sockets like that. After that, the monkey did not stop, but continued to beat the bird on the back, almost a massage, and asked if she wanted to make friends. As it turned out, it was a special way of making friends from the monkey. Long conversation. The gorilla then told her to answer quickly, otherwise she would continue to beat her. And the birds had the feeling that many sheep were trampling on it, but it was probably not the way to make friends, according to the bird. Their almost new friend quickly began to spin, thereby quickly knocking the monkey off his back, which she did not expect. Then the bird decided to quickly fly away from the grief, so it quickly flapped its wings and ran away. So the result of the monkey's method of making friends was that she watched sadly as her friends flew away from her. This made her very angry, and she began to beat herself in the chest, as she was used to doing. However, in one moment, something caught her attention, and she looked at the tree and was struck by an idea. Approaching them, she began to lift one of them, not a problem in her current state. The monkey comfortably held it above her head and prepared to throw it. It could be taken as a gift according to her scheme. And after that, with all her might, she threw it straight into the blue sky with white clouds. But the bird saw that the trunk of some tree was flying at it, which was thrown at it, not giving it rest. From such a shock, even the bird spoke and started scolding the girl and asking who makes friends like that. You can understand her, to be honest. She herself was barely able to turn away from the blow. The boy looked at all this and asked whether it seemed to him that the strange bird had just begun to quarrel with the monkey or not. He was still covered in blood, wounded and with a sword in him. However, he had other things to do, which was to deal with the wolf that was still there and was also in shock at everything that was happening. But he commented that the fact that the gorilla threw a tree at the bird was just familiarity, and he was not surprised that the bird started fighting. The monkey looked carefully at the bird, and the bird shouted in the background. What a wonderful world he had entered. Then he thought that he was still on that damned bird, and he was leaving her for the girl. Right now, he needed to focus on dealing with this dog. The boy looked at her, and she stood as if glued. He did not understand why he just stood there. The wolf was looking at the gorilla, and the boy thought that he must have been too scared, because the little girl he was mocking had suddenly turned into a huge monster. Lin Yuan smiled and was glad that he now had help, and the opponent was also left without a sword. But in his thoughts, he advised him to run away while he had the chance, and if his own life was dear to him. He waved his hand and began to ask whether they had finished the fight or not, and whether he planned to continue fighting or not. However, the dog had a fighting nature, so he did not plan to run away and began to growl, and then jumped on the dragon in general. The guy even wondered if he had said something wrong or why he suddenly became aggressive again. But they had been fighting for so long, and the wolf didn't even seem tired, because neither the speed nor the power has decreased in the slightest. Abruptly, the wolf changed its trajectory and was behind the boy, who realized that he wanted his sword back. But he spent too much energy and strength to take the knife from that person, and now he won't let it go back so easily. The boy waved his tail, knocking down the wolf. But there was a problem. His body stopped obeying him, his heart panicked, and his breathing became labored. It was too bad, because with such a large body, even a small amount of lost blood still made him feel sick. In his opinion, it was not fair. Suddenly, the little monkey remembered and heard that a fight was going on behind her between her friend and her enemy. However, the bird also noticed this, and decided that this was a great moment to attack the gorilla, who was distracted for a moment. She quickly flew to her and wanted to grab her with her huge paw. The girl noticed this and thought about what she should do in such a situation. As a result, Varvara decided to attack with her fist and delivered many blows with them. The boy yelled at the girl to ignore him and focus on the fight with the bird, which was more important to her. He had already realized that this strange bird could use many different tricks and completely control the air. But he hoped that the monkey would not be hurt as a result. Yes, he understood that despite how strong and large his body was, it was difficult to fight with a sword in his chest. He understood that he needed to act as quickly as possible and defeat at least one of those two. The wolf was also not standing still and preparing to attack the dragon, Then he grabbed the sword, pushing away from Kui, and tried to pull it out, get it before he saw it. The surprise effect. Despite the boy's words, the barbarian still looked back at him and understood that he was in bad business. However, the bird was just waiting for this and wanted to use it to its own advantage in order to win and was already smiling. Of course, they did not have friendship. Taking advantage of the bird's moment, it scratched the back of the gorilla with its claws up to the point of blood, from which she fell on her stomach and lay there for a moment, and her enemy did not plan to retreat, just like a wolf attacking a dragon. Kui shouting, he asked why he came so close to his back, and whether he had already forgotten what it could turn out to be for him. Only now did he remember this, but he did not let go of the sword, which he held tightly in his mouth and did not look like he was planning to let go. But quickly remembering what might happen to him, he got off Lin Yuan's back without a knife, fearing for his life. And after that, he began to run away. The hero said that he knew that he was still afraid of him and was not as fearless as he wanted to appear. Then the boy concentrated all the energy in his mouth and said that he cheated him because he had a different goal. Namely, a bird that previously attacked a gorilla and scratched its back. And she was clearly not prepared for this sudden attack. However, she didn't have enough time left to escape from there, so the blue beam hit her completely. At the same time, the bird screamed, asking why it was always hurt and that it was not fair, and soared higher into the sky. The girl looked at it, shielding herself from the rays with her hands. It was strange that a weak boy who had always been bullied in his past life was now doing everything to save his only friend. The boy felt very sick, so he thought about the fact that everything depended on his sister. She got up and approached the boy. While Kui was catching his breath, they wanted to attack him, namely the wolf cub. But the barbarian suddenly appeared, who was next to them in a moment and was ready to protect the hero. But she began to beat him in the stomach with incredible force. The dog could not fight back on its own. The wolf flew straight into the air because of it, but he deserved it. However, he didn't hit hard, he just landed on his paws and became even angrier than before. Then, their opponent easily pushed off the ground and ran at speed at the gorilla, who looked ready. But despite her fearsome appearance and the fact that she looked as if she was ready for a fight, the wolf was still able to quickly bite her leg to the point of bleeding. Then the dog whined, and the girl swung her giant fists at her. She struck, but unfortunately, the wolf managed to escape and she hit the ground. The dog was in a moment on a tree, and behind it was some kind of red trail, a track. And from that tree, the dog jumped back to the girl and wanted to grab and bite her hand because he was looking right there. But as a result, he managed to fulfill his plan and he bit her hand with all his might. And even the girl was surprised by this, wondering why their opponent was so strong. The guy in the background was breathing and thinking that he was lucky that the girl had time to come to his aid, because otherwise he would have killed him for sure. But he said that it is very difficult to fight with this puppy. He is very strong, and even a tough gorilla can hardly stand against him. But even after such a long fight, the wolf continued to keep a good pace and did not even look tired. Suddenly, he noticed something and thought for a moment, looking ahead. As it turned out, he noticed that the other jackals had long since fled into the forest and that perhaps he was still fighting to give them time to escape. And this meant that the wolf was a serious strategist. The barbarian was still fighting the wolf, a difficult battle, at least because the dog still did not let go of his hand. But she quickly came up with a way, namely, punching the enemy in the face. Thus, she was finally able to free her hand. She was free, but the dog flew into the air. He is already almost a bird there after all the battles. But he didn't fly for long, and twisting himself out, decided to run to the dragon, who already had enough difficulties in his life. A new theory appeared that the dog was not only buying time, but also did not think to run away at first. And all this was a trap to reduce the vigilance of others and attack at a critical moment. But the girl quickly found herself near them and firmly took the dog by his long fluffy tail. She shouted that she was now his opponent, not a boy, and he should fight her, to pull the howling wolf towards her, away from Lin Yuan. And then she started spinning in a circle at high speed and almost flew away with him. After that, she just threw him at speed and he hit a tree, because they are still in the forest. The opponent slammed his back into a tree with a thud and groaned. The monkey beat its chest and gradually approached the dog, which was not yet moving much and shaking at all. The wolf finally looked tired and panting as he lay on the ground. Illipets did not understand what he was thinking when he decided to attack him, but I thought why he wants to fight with him so much and can't leave him alone. He had few chances, he was tired, he could not draw his sword, and against the girl he was a dead body. The idea of a sword that could so easily wound him came into his head, which means that it was a special sword and a real find. That is why the wolf wanted to keep him close to him and did not want to give him away. The question of where he learned all these tricks and where did he come from in general remained a mystery. It seemed to him that at least a part, but there was a human brain in it. The barbarian continued to fight with him, not thinking about these things because the battle would be terrible, which could lead to serious injuries. So he decided that he should end this battle in the most humane way possible and reduce the risk of both of them getting beaten up, while Varvar dodged the blow. Therefore, he shouted for them to immediately stop doing what they were doing now, namely fighting. But he approached and spoke to the wolf, asking if he understood what he was saying. And he suggested that they discuss something. The girl told the dragon not to stop her, because she had already almost won, but even her voice was already quieter than usual. Quay said there was no point in continuing because their opponent wasn't taking her territory or food, she confirmed. The boy understood that she understood him, but only because she ate the fruit of transformation. But the big wolf also understood him and was a monster, which means that there was only one theory that explained it all. He came into contact with people, which means that they were once on this island. Quay continued that he understood the importance of the sword to the wolf and was willing to give it back to him and smiled as he pointed at it. He said that even though they don't know each other, he will return the sword to him and their paths will never cross again, and asked if this option is suitable for him. The wolf looked at the boy in shock, as if he had seen an alien, and was silent at first. The dragon did not give up and continued to tell that now he would get that sword and return it to its owner. But he asked his sister to help him get it. Everyone looked at him with interest. The monkey looked at him suspiciously, but began to try little by little to get that sword from his back. When she took it seriously, of course, blood flowed from the wound, which was held by the sword and acted as a plug. And of course it all hurt a lot, he screamed, and his eyes and snot were running. The girl was scared while he asked if she wanted him dead. The wolf howled loudly. It was not clear what it meant. The monkey and the dragon looked at it and wondered if everything was okay at all. The eyes were like 5 kopecks. The monster had wounds and he bent down and almost lay down on the ground in an effort to start breathing calmly, and took the earth with his tongue and put it on the same wound. 2 other characters watched this carefully, watching what and how he was doing. Then it suddenly dawned on him, and he understood what the wolf wanted to say. Namely, that it was necessary to use clean, dry soil and cauterize the wound. Then it will be able to stop the bleeding. This was reasonable, and further proved that the wolf was in contact with some humans. The boy took the soil in his fist and asked the monkey to do the same. The girl did so with a smile. Then she quickly drew her sword and applied the soil to the open wound on her back, just as the boy had said. In our life, I could be a doctor. Now, they were standing on one side and he said that the sword was taken, which means that he fulfilled his agreement. And at the same time, he held the wound with soil. The barbarian threw a sword at the wolf and it crashed into the ground. The character himself stood on the side without moving. But then he came up and quickly, lightly took the knife by the handle, still doing everything very carefully. After that, he quickly started running and separated into the forest. The dragon calmly looked at it. When their former opponent was walking through the forest with a sword in his teeth, but some incredible woman in a dress and blue-grey long hair shot from the side. Suddenly, the woman sitting on the branch said that if she could not get the core of the barbarian monkey, then she would have to take the spirit core from the wolf himself. After that, the boy fell on his back. The girl asked if everything was okay with him. He replied that how could he be okay? At least his stomach was seriously cut. She tried to help as much as she could and offered to apply more earth to the wounds and held earth with worms in her hand, which embarrassed the boy because the soil was supposed to be clean, but not like that. Therefore, the boy quickly began to deny such help and said that he was not talking about the stomach, but about the stomach, and meant that you need to eat well. Vava quickly agreed, said that she would find something, and ran. The boy breathed a sigh of relief. After some time, they already had a campfire and other monsters for a snack. The girl was holding a jackal in her hands and was preparing to make a delicious kebab out of it. Jackals were resurrected from the fact that they were making kebabs until their eyes popped out of their sockets. Even the hero could not look at it, saying that it was too cruel. During that time, the heroine had already managed to do enough and already skewered more than one shish kebab. Lin Yuan suddenly spoke loudly, asking if she knew how to cook at all, and that they should not be turned so often but should be left to cook, then said that they were burning now. I wouldn't cook anything for him at all. Then he wanted to give the monkey a pat on the back of the head that she was exercising all the time, but she ignored him and continued to do her business and was getting ready to eat. And then she saw that her hand was on fire because of the wool, and he simply grabbed his head and said the main phrase that he said. And in general, he didn't care. He was sad because of the kebabs that fell to the ground. But he had to do it himself. But he trusted, and that's what he got. Everything was burnt. It was dirty and bitter. But he was given points, and for that I thank him. And if it weren't for them, he wouldn't have eaten it. But the little monkey would eat with real pleasure. He was surprised, because she really liked it, and that she was definitely not a gourmet. He also received a notification that his body was seriously injured and points were automatically removed because of this to heal. So, in this way, he was cured and felled himself. Especially since everything healed so quickly. When he became a monster, he registered and gained the explosive breath ability. The boy became a dragon and could kill anyone with his help. It was only necessary to use the breath. The dragon promised that he would become invincible now. He must become so. Because in the past, when he met the bird of death and the wolf, he was beaten with terrible shame, which is a shame. According to the monkey sister, in order to defeat the king of reptiles, her relatives teamed up with others, but they still could not win. In other words, the gulf between them was too terrible to cross. 600 points were awarded to him. But he had a goal to develop and become stronger every day and gain evolution points. His sister now had much more time, and he thought of giving some things to his sister to help. At the very least, he needs a strong companion. Then he thought for a moment and wanted to ask the barbarian something. Namely, where did the blue bird with which she fought go, and does she know where she went after the explosive breath hit her? The girl said that she had fallen somewhere. He beamed and said that if she hadn't made a sound for so long, the bird must have died. The gorilla looked at him strangely, and he went to cook almost chicken. They went to the place where the bird most likely fell into, but there was a huge pit. But the bird itself was not there. He got angry and did not understand where she had gone and why there was nothing and no one there, because they would have noticed if she had flown away. The little monkey just ate in silence and said that when they looked for food, it was no longer there either. The system suddenly appeared, and he wondered why he decided to yawn so suddenly. Xiao Kun turned to the other side and said that he felt a strong energy fluctuation, which means that the monster is becoming human. He was very angry and surprised, not understanding whether this bird becomes a person or what. Then the truth quickly calmed down and thought that, in principle, he was not surprised, since they did not find the bird there, and this is all with the help of the transformation fruit, which only Xiao Kun gives. The system began to deny this and say that it is not him, and that his goal is to help friends and love, and he would not bother with this terrible bird. Here the boy frowned and asked about love and helping his friends, and that he thought Xiao Kun wanted him dead. He whistled a little in the other direction. So, Xiao Kun changed the subject to talking about the transformation of the bird and that he was worried about something else. Namely, does the dragon remember what happened after their first battle, when the bird took the nucleus from the corpse of the Tyxosaurus, ate it and was immediately cured? The guy said that he remembers this. Xiao Kun put on the glasses and repeated that the source of the monster's life was its crystal source and she could get it. And this method of eating cores was similar to the one where you have to eat the very body that he uses. And this already sincerely surprised him. For the monkey, it looked as if the boy was talking to himself, and she began to worry that her brother had fainted after the fight. She continued to look at it strangely. And he said that this means that if a strange bird can be treated in this way, then it can be renewed. Xiao Kun confirmed, but said that it wasn't a fact yet and that Kui would have to kill her and then let her analyze and guess the key to figure it all out. The guy remembered that when he used the explosive breath, could not kill him with it, so I don't know how to kill her and whether they will meet again. A scientific expert said that even a small particle is enough, and that will be enough. Lin Yuan raised his hand in a sign that he would not blink what to do, and said that if Xiao Kun needed it so much, then let him go himself. But he didn't have time and continued to eat. Then he said that he had his own plan, namely to become stronger and in the end, invincible in general. After that, he called to the monkey and told her to keep up and that they were going to his house because they had already eaten all the food in her territory. The barbarian asked if there was a lot of food on his territory. He gladly confirmed that there was. He was already waiting to see the faces of the animals that chased him away. And here he will come, and also with a new gourmet. A week has passed since then. The guy came out of the cave that was his home. There was even writing there. It was morning, and the young man was gaining solar energy. The barbarian actually woke up even faster, which surprised him, and she also prepared food and laid everything out. Just like the mandarin tree, which he also praised for its well-decomposed firewood. And then he said that he asked her not to catch the poisonous spiders that were there, but to watch without understanding. The guy continued that, even though they are big and the poison won't cause much damage, but why if they aren't even tasty? The monkey wrote all this down in a notebook. Then he sat down and said it was time to start, while the food was being fried and the monkey sprinkled it with magical sprinkles. The boy also thought that maybe he should teach her how to drill wood so that she could learn how to light a fire, because he was tired of doing it every time. Every day was the same for him, namely, open his mouth, cough and go to sleep like that in a circle. It was an almost perfect life for him. Lin Yuan snapped his fingers and said he wanted to log in. So he entered the sleepy forest on the island and as a reward received the battle roar of a dragon, level A. The description of this ability was as follows. After this roar, the blood of his teammates boiled and the waves received a blessing. And it made the enemies dizzy and their movements were dulled. And he needed to defeat all the monsters of the abyss. He was glad that finally, after 30 days of logging into the system, he was given a new ability, at least something cool. Xiao Kun also congratulated him on the fact that he registered in the system exactly 1 month ago. Exactly 1 month ago, he was on the island, so he was given a gift set of reinforcement. Lin Yuan was overjoyed and started asking what it was, how it would help, and how cool it was. It was a gift set of amplification specially prepared for him by Xiao Kun himself. It was something at the expense of the great, wonderful, with simple skills and props. The system was clearly satisfied. And since the owner logged in every day, even without interrupting the system for a whole month, the system also opened a system shopping center, a map, and other auxiliary functions for him to increase the comfort of the host. And he was also gifted with 300,000 evolution points. Out of happiness, he was happy about all these things and said that he will definitely spend all these points when he leaves the location for beginners. And that finally the system began to have a conscience and asked to open the shopping center faster and show him the entire assortment. Sunny outside and a blue star flew past his cave. A shopping center was opened to him and the guy immediately started criticizing it, saying that it was a terrible interface because there was almost nothing there and it looked very bad. Nevertheless, he began to enter various categories and see what was good there. The categories were as follows. Thunder Fruit, Yin and Yang Eye, Titanium Mechanism. But each category had a certain icon. In the first category was the Thunder Fruit from the world of the Pirate King. The hero approved this thing since this ability helped to turn into a thunderstorm and still be able to move with the speed of lightning. It was cool and exciting. This ability would perfectly complement and take away the disadvantages of the large size of the monster's body and its wide range of actions. There was also the fruit of Yin and Yang. It would help the hero to better feel the situation on the battlefield and easily understand and see the shoals of opponents, even the strongest ones. In the background were statues of Hokage from Naruto. The third was a titanium mechanism from the titanium world. There was the titanium outfit from Barth's novel Kisler is a Titanium World. He was delighted. We liked all the things that were there, and he thought that for the 300,000 points he was given, he could buy anything he wanted, and it was everything. But he quickly became disappointed when he realized that each of them cost several tens of millions. The lowest price was 100 million evolution points, and the most expensive was 500 million. The dragon's jaw dropped. And I thought about the fact that the system wants to take all the money from him. Xiaokun commented that in general he rejected a few more millions because all the goods are from parallel universes and express delivery costs a lot of money. Moreover, the guy himself entered the category of the most expensive goods, and he needs to go to the right. There he will see universal class at the lowest prices. Here he realized that it was possible to move the screen and that it was not the worst technology after all. Xiaokun said that he himself was a high-tech product from the beginning. There was bone meal made of titanium alloy, and the price was 50 million. 20 million lightning tail. A cannon with 10 million infected particles. Looking at this, the guy asked if they really have such an expensive delivery service, like in the ordinary world. He continued to spin, trying to find something among all these goods. Even though he has been working for a long time and has worked for a long time, he has not yet earned his first million, and he is being offered goods worth 10 million or more. She probably makes fun of his poverty. One good thing was that his clan has a very long life, and in just a few years he will sooner or later be able to gather his strength and accumulate the amount he needs. Especially since by that time he may already become a 10,000-meter behemoth, but then he probably won't need anything else. He then said he wanted out of them all. But the system began to stop him and tell him to wait, because you can use the filtering function with the help of which he will be able to find goods that will cost less than 1 million. The guy replied that this was the place to start and asked to be given a look. After a few minutes, he was already looking at something and almost cried. As it turned out, he found a product that cost less than 1 million, but there was one problem, which was that this product was a special barbecue seasoning, and it cost 1,000 evolution points. But this option did not suit him because it would not scare anyone. However, he bought the seasoning anyway and was congratulated on it and told that it was just the beginning. He was barely able to pull out the can and threw it on the ground. Such a service! The entire package was wet and he began to shake the water out of it and at the same time sprinkled the seasoning on his food. It all looked promising and quite so appetizing. So, he said he was done shopping at the mall for now and would leave it for the future. But he said that if there was soda before it, it would have been chic in general, and the others even salivated. They all started eating and he asked the system to show him the map again. The system map was a panoramic view of the island, which he obtained as a result of filming and photography. The dragon used scientific methods to do this. Xiaokun appeared and said that due to the size of the island and the difficulty in the topography, he could only show the exact topography in the area where the boy registered. The boy looked at it carefully and agreed that the island was very big, and he ran around it for a whole month at a speed of 20 km/h before he came across a place the size of a palm. Then the dragon realized that this map could be moved and enlarged and said that he wanted to look at one place more closely. He was looking for something and asked where exactly the grey area was located, which was in the north. He found this place and it looked strange and terrible. And if you look closely, there were the same grey spots on the territory where gorillas and birds of death lived. These were the places where the grey dead earth was located, which was called so because reptiles ate everything there. Xiaokun replied that he had already been to such a land where the sky was cloudy. The land was grey and nothing grew on it. There were no plants, no animals, no one. Everything is grey as death. In other words, these cursed reptiles continued to expand their territory. They all agreed that it was terrible. They needed to be stopped and done as quickly as possible. It was decided to follow their trail and kill every one of them they saw on the way, one by one. Kui hoped that they would be able to do it all. Xiaokun began about what was needed: use fast feet to open the entire map of the island. And when he opens the entire map, he can become the real king of Jiyuan Island. The hero asked what worried him the most, and that was whether there would be any reward for opening the map completely. But the system did not respond, and they were already thinking about the future. The boy thought about what and how he should do. He had to defeat the king of reptiles, or at least deal with simple reptiles to begin with. The boy looked at the barbarian. He wanted to avenge her parents and restore the natural beauty and tranquility of Jiyuan Island. The guy was really into him by now. The girl looked at him intently without understanding, and he came up and stroked her head. Then he thought about the title of king of the island and decided that when all this was sorted out, the island would be ruled by his little sister, a monkey. He continued to stroke her, and they both held food in their hands. But he suddenly began to shout that his dream was a little different, namely, to become the king of all monsters, and not of one island. From this cry, he scared the unfortunate girl. The gorilla did not understand what was being said. What is the king of the island, the king of monsters? So I decided to ask if they are tasty, and if they are tastier than shish kebab. Well done, girl, I support. And he was already puffed up. But I thought about how stubborn she is sometimes, and that these are titles that can be obtained, and why she is always thinking about food. But then he threw it all away and said that it didn't matter, and offered to continue eating, hugging her. Suddenly, something fell on the gorilla's meat, and she did not understand what it was and thought that it might be some new seasoning of her brother. But she quickly took it away because it smelled so bad that it made her feel sick. Because it stank of poop. Dinosaurs were flying from above, and one of them said that this was it. Why was the girl seriously so angry? And after that, in anger, she threw the meat on the floor. Aggression is not a solution to problems, but everyone would do the same. And immediately after that, she started jumping in an effort to catch those assholes. The floor broke from her jumps. However, of course, she was never able to catch them, because at least they have wings. And they knew that, so they just made fun of her. However, once she almost caught someone's paw, which was already serious. Even the dinosaurs panicked, and I remind them of wings, and they started it. But it did not last long, and she began to fall back to the ground, still very angry. Everything was fine with the boy. He calmly ate while the monkey was aggressively doing something. Then he realized that she wanted to get the rock and most likely hit someone. But she decided to take the stone that they used as a step and asked if she understood that if she wanted to kill those pterosaurs, she would not be able to do anything with the stone. But not that she would listen. The guy took a moment to use his new skills and told her to give him this opportunity and concentrate. He opened his mouth wide and some energy, waves, began to flow from him. But the main thing is that he did not release his meat. He created something like a barrier and all the pterosaurs started shaking. And he was thrilled that it really worked. And from his blow, the unfortunate pterosaurs flew free into space, or almost broke up on the way. But then he thought about the fact that he wanted to make her the king of the island, and she couldn't handle several pterosaurs by herself. But he was a little disappointed. The barbarian was still standing next to the stone that she wanted to lift even before that. The hero wanted to become stronger, and for this he wanted to eat everything in his path. But to improve the strength of the monkey, it will be necessary to prepare several more special training projects. So he told her that from tomorrow they will start her special training. And he will teach her to be a woman, a warrior who would be worthy of a king. She herself stood in a little shock and asked what kind of training this was and whether it was tastier than barbecue. He stood and thought hard, remembering what physical education exams there had been in his past, especially since he always got 2s for them. He remembered that there were pull-ups, a 1,000-meter run and something else. He was trying to come up with a special set of training for monsters, and this was the first stage in his plan. So far, there were 3 points in his training plan: strength training, pull-ups, speed, running for 1,000 meters, endurance, running for 100,000 meters. With grief in half, the boy decided to leave everything as it is and then come up with something new. After that, he called the monkey and said that from today its week-long training called Monster Triathlon begins. And that this is to help her become stronger and become the king of Jiyuan Island. Meanwhile, the girl was eating, then turned to the boy and asked what should be done for this. And already in the classics, I asked if it is tastier than shashlik. She was told that she needed to train so that in the future she could easily win a battle against a strange bird and a wolf general. She replied that she was not interested in such a thing because they did not take away her barbecue, so why beat them? And in general, she lay down on her side without worrying about anything. The dragon knew that this would be the case, so he prepared other methods to persuade her to go to training, namely, he bought the seasoning. And in the past, the guy was a good dog trainer, although one of his wards ended up in the hospital after that. But it's not important for now. So he spoke to the monkey again and said that if she would do what he asked her to do, and held a jar of seasoning in his hands. And then he will reward her with a delicious kebab sprinkled with a special barbecue seasoning. The gorilla quickly reacted to this and glowed and even began to climb. She started beating her chest and said that she wanted to take part in this special training because it meant that it would be delicious afterwards. The guy smiled a little crookedly and said that gourmets are very easy to persuade. The first item in this special training was strength training, so he told the monkey to do 1,000 pull-ups, but he explained how to do it, namely, you had to jump up and grab onto a tree and lift your body up. After that, Lin Yuan decided to demonstrate what it should look like. He got into a preparatory pose, hands at shoulder width and all that. After that, he started trying to grab hold of a tree that lay parallel to it and was a horizontal bar. But there was one problem, which was that he forgot that his arms were too short for that. He tried somehow to jump up and grab hold, but he couldn't do anything. However, the dragon did not give up and continued to jump up, according to his dream, or almost, and he was able to grab onto that tree, though with his mouth, not with his hands. But what's the difference? The main thing is that he was able to, and he could barely explain that she should do the same, but with her hands, they just have different anatomy. The monkey looked at it skeptically. Then, when Kui looked down, he realized he couldn't see the gorilla there and wondered where it had gone if it had just been there. But suddenly, a hand was extended to him from above and he looked at it. It was Barbarian, who was already sitting on this tree, gave him her hand and asked if she just needed to climb the tree, and if so, then there is nothing complicated about it. She offered her help. The boy let go of that tree and decided that anyway, the outcome of the fight depends on endurance. Therefore, I decided to move on to the second point. He said that he must have underestimated her abilities and she must be the queen of the horizontal bar. But even with very strong hands, this does not guarantee victory. After some time, they came to a lake where there were imperial crocodiles who were not happy with such guests. But the gorilla didn't take long to figure it out and stood on one of them. I'm sure his back broke, if he has one. And in general, it was a run of 100,000 meters, with which the gorilla coped quite easily, running and jumping. With this, she was clearly overtaking the boy, who was barely teleporting somewhere behind her and was just running to the crocodiles and was already breathing heavily. He made complete chaos with his running. Then he flipped over the unfortunate crocodiles with one paw, but such victims. Here he had a flashback about how he once couldn't beat any girl in sports. But even now that he is a monster, nothing has changed, which made him a little sad. The girl stopped and looked back at him, showing that he now owes her more food. She didn't even look a bit tired. All the animals that suffered just quietly cried and watched as they left, thinking that finally. And after that, they began to put up signs that said that it is not necessary to exceed the speed limit in order to avoid accidents. Everything near their house was broken, the trees were broken, even the inscription on the cave was slanted, but at least they were at home. Here they had some tasks for combat skills, because the dragon shouted that strength and endurance are just the basis, the base, the soil, the foundation. But strikes and combat skills are what really decide the course of the battle. But he showed me how to do it, and he wags his tail. This was the third part, combat training. And from the blow of the same tail, the girl could not wriggle out. And as a result, she ended up lying on the ground and also with a roar for complete happiness. However, during that time, she had visibly darkened and became more serious and more intimidating looking than usual. The boy ran up to his sister feeling a little worried and asked if everything was okay with her. And he apologized for having slightly underestimated the weight of his tail and hoped he hadn't knocked her out. But the little monkey was waiting for this. So when his face appeared in reach, she charged there with a smile. Now he had a purple bruise on his eye and for some reason started yelling that she was such a bad student that she could just pretend to be dead and attack after. And then he reminded her that he had once said that a dragon should not be punched in the face. But suddenly he began to gather all his energy, which scared the poor girl. But they said that now he will show her his signature explosive breath. And the boy showed him, but the gorilla barely managed to escape from him. The stream stretched across almost the entire island, just above the trees. But he fell on those animals that had already received enough through training for speed. Then Xiaokun appeared, looking into the distance and saying that there used to be a good place, beautiful landscapes, flocks of birds and many animals. And now it looked like reptiles had been there. Everything was dead. He said that if they continue to train like this, they won't have to worry about the reptile anymore because they are already doing their job perfectly. It was very appropriate. The guy quickly agreed. But he said that if they scare all the animals now, they won't even have anything to eat in the future, and he couldn't allow that. But in order to defeat the reptile king, they had to increase their skills and strength. And the only way to do it was training. And now he had to think about other options and ways. The system put on the glasses and said that due to their size, the ground was literally tearing apart in agony from the stomping of their feet. Although in principle, he supported their training, but not when they brought so much damage to all living things. Here the dragon got a great idea after the word about size and dimensions, which consisted in the fact that if they were not so large, they would be able to train calmly. But he decided to ask if they would be able to save the training process if they turned into humans. Saikun replied that in principle it was possible, but there was a but. Special training in human form could increase the physical body's ability to carry crystalline nuclear energy. As physical abilities and skills increase, the energy of the crystal core will also increase. This was shown on the principle of Lin Yuan's body. Well, when they return to the form of a monster and the energy increases due to the destruction of the crystal core, then the power should also increase. So the boy was happy and said that it suits them. They will both transform into human form and then do their training very hard. True, there was another question, which was, can they even become human now? The gorilla looked at the dragon strangely, and the system replied that he must have read Chuzhen's novels. When transforming from a human into a monster, the crystal core is destroyed by the power of the mind, and the energy of the core is directed to the limbs and bones. It's like the opening of the pill in Chuzhen's novel. But when turning from a monster into a person, it is with the help of the power of the mind that the power is concentrated in the dantian. Condensed into a crystalline core, it is like a moment from cultivation novels. The guy concluded that first he became a monster from a man, and then it was the other way around. I asked the system if it was not completely written off the plot and the foundation of the system from the same novel. He turned to his sister and said that in order not to destroy the entire territory, they need to become human again and then continue training. She nodded easily, and he continued to say that he would teach her everything. But he started by saying that first you need to sit down, cross your legs, look at the tip of the nose, and then look at where the heart should be. It was necessary to add that the strength in the body is concentrated in the dantian position, and he did what he told about. Then, Xue already started to feel changes in himself and opened his eyes. But as it turned out, it was not that, but what he wanted in the toilet. So he quickly left the gorilla and went off to do his business, while the monkey remained in an almost meditative position. And then, after a certain time, I will happily return to the place of their farewell. But I felt much better. But I noticed that the monkey was no longer there, and at first I thought that maybe she wanted to go to the toilet too, which doesn't happen with anyone. But then I looked around and heard some screeching. It was a girl shouting that she was there. And she waved her hands so that he would finally notice her. He still saw her and was surprised that she took human form so quickly, clearly faster than he expected. However, now he began to worry that she would look down on him when he became human. But there was nowhere to turn. So he prepared to become a man, even found a bandage, concentrated, represented his crystalline core. I remembered myself in a past life. But he was worried about the fact that in terms of strength, endurance, and fighting skills, he would lose to his sister. And he hoped that knowing that she was stronger would give him incredible motivation. He breathed, calmed down, and the girl was already bored of knocking that martyr. It was already getting dark, the girl was already having a snack, and he still hadn't changed. Long. The girl turned back into a gorilla and said that it was time for dinner and he needed to light a fire. He tried to concentrate further, but he couldn't. He was nervous and starting to get a little angry. He was thinking about what could happen a little more. But he could not calm down, and this was his main problem. Then he approached the gorilla and began to shout, asking why it so easily became a human. But he said that she should be quiet and not interfere with him and his worldview. Explosive breath began to form in him, although he did not want it and he himself was in shock. The monkey immediately moved away and asked what it was that made him cover up and why he decided to launch his explosive breath now. And he did not plan, that was the problem. Then he thought that it could be due to the fact that the technique of creating breath and transformation is similar. He needed to concentrate all the energy of his body in one certain point. But he didn't know what to do because if he sent it down it would destroy his entire territory and he couldn't afford that. So he decided to swallow it. The hero did so and all the energy went down his body down. Then he finally swallowed it and everything was fine with him, which made him incredibly happy. Released only a small blue smoke, and then it suddenly glowed golden too. Why, at first he was surprised and looked at his hands. After he swallowed his breath, he was able to turn into a human. Do what you want. It was most likely the easiest and shortest way to trigger the power in his body. So he became a blonde boy again. Last time he was busy running away from crocodiles and needed to save himself. Therefore, he did not have enough time to fully feel his body. He managed to do it in a day, and now the sun was already setting far beyond the horizon. He smiled and talked about the fact that even 100,000 meters or 1,000 pull-ups are nothing to him at all. Therefore, he wound circles around gorillas, leopards and crocodiles and a fire in the middle. And he also pulled himself up on a homemade horizontal bar. The girl was already looking tired and said that he would soon die of hunger. The guy aggressively pulled himself up and talked about wanting to set a new record. In his past life, his record was only 8 seconds. He had a purpose and a goal in his eyes. In the past, everyone called him a loser because he couldn't pull up, but now it was easy for him. The next morning began already, and he continued to count and tighten up. The account already went from 4,000. He finally decided to stop, because it was already morning anyway. He was glad that he was able to turn into a human so that he could improve his training process and protect the world around him. Then the boy looked at the monkey and the mouse, who were still sleeping and did not understand why they had not woken up yet, because it was already morning. I wonder why. However, he quickly remedied this by running at them, hitting them and yelling in their ears. Screamed that now it is necessary to train not to sleep. And he sent the mandarin to get firewood and if she meets a monster, to call him. Mother Pochchi told her to become human again and go train with him. She became a girl again, but she was still very sleepy, while the boy, on the contrary, was very energetic. He pretended to be very satisfied and said that even in human form he could transform his energy without any remorse. But he said that if she also won this time, he would prepare 10 kebab skewers with a special seasoning for her. Such an offer immediately woke her up and interested her so much that she opened her eyes completely. And while he was still talking, the girl began to attack him imperceptibly with a jump. But she hit him on the blonde head with her hands, saying that for 10 skewers she could not beat him. It would be almost a sin. And as a result, the guy fell headfirst into the ground and complained that she didn't even let him finish. Then a terrible fight began, where the boy usually won. It's just that he didn't have as much serious motivation as she did. He was covered in bruises and told her to stop. Another week passed. Lin Yuan's cave, where his self-sculpture was, the boy could have been a sculptor in another life. The guy was pretty beat up and said that for the past few weeks all they had been doing was training. Varvara was even very pleased with herself. He also collected 600,000 points because he ate forever. So the dragon began to calculate that he would leave 100,000 just in case, and the rest for his improvement. Appealed to Xiao Kun to add all 500,000 points to his development. So he began to change. Varvara looked at it with surprise and admiration. Also, there they repeated all his stats and skills, and also said that his childhood period has already passed. And Quay grew noticeably taller, and Varvara nervously asked why he had grown so suddenly. He replied that it was because he was still growing and was generally satisfied with his answer. But he continued that he still needs to eat on time, not be picky, go to bed early, and always be healthy. The monkey was still in shock, and the boy had already left and said that today they would be checking the results of their training for the whole week. And he decided to test it immediately in practice, namely in a battle with reptiles, so now they were going to one of their hiding places in the south of the forest. But in the end, he told her to do what he says and everything will be fine, and then they will make kebabs from those reptiles. Varvar's eyes became heart-shaped. She was very happy to have such an option for lunch or dinner. But she said that this is her calling, to destroy them. And he realized that he had mastered how to talk to a gourmet. Well, a plus. Then, with the rest, they reached the hideout of the reptiles. Their enemies, sitting on mountains of bones and slime, was not the best sight. There were a lot of reptiles, all of which were unusual. The entrance was guarded by only a few reptiles, so they would have to go there easily and quietly. Meanwhile, they hid behind a huge stone. Then he looked back at the girl, but she was gone, and the boy did not understand where she had gone so quickly. Then the dragon looked ahead and realized that she had run straight at the reptile without thinking long. But he realized that although both practiced a lot and all that, he did not teach her how to sneak up. Of course, the reptiles immediately began to attack, which was not surprising. But the monkey easily coped with one of them, hitting her shoulder without pity and correctly. There were two more who were also preparing to attack, as well as the barbarian, and that's all at the entrance to the cave. The monkey took each one by the arm and slammed them both together, thus destroying them both in one fell swoop. The main problem was that a lot of new ones started to crawl out of the cave, which was logical, but it would be more difficult to deal with all of them than with 3. Here the brother had already approached, who began to ask if it was easier for her to fight with them now, and was smiling. And he added that after training, her strength and reaction improved significantly. The dragon smiled slyly and talked about the fact that once he definitely lost to that strange bird and wolf, the general, because then you can't look at anyone else. But today, the boy will finally be able to show what kind of dough he is made of, and is not at all the same as before. Everyone attacked them, and he said that if they killed everyone, they would definitely have food for the whole week. They fended off them quite well. The boy also saw that despite their number, there was no point in the small ones attacking in a bunch. This technique was not effective at all, and then he smiled and said that he didn't mind, he liked to beat and chew them. Afterwards, he turned to the girl and said that their dinner depends on her. The more she kills, the tastier and fuller the kebabs she will eat. Her eyes immediately lit up and a second breath opened. He already knew exactly what he needed to say to get her interested. The girl said she wanted to eat 500 kebabs. Lin Yuan replied that these little ones could be praised and awarded the title of delivering food directly to their mouths. And it was necessary to be able to lose like that. He called them the bravest of all with whom he fought. Then a new batch of reptiles crawled out of the cave to them. All swamps are green and decidedly not pretty. They stopped at the exit and looked at the dragon and the gorilla, and they looked at them. Suddenly, something changed and they all turned and crawled back into the cave. Kui wondered what was wrong with them, that they had so drastically rearranged the route. But he said that it didn't turn out well. He just praised them for their bravery, and then they ran away and abandoned them. The barbarian was enraged by their escape. Lin Yuan why, in the middle of the fight, they decided to stop fighting. Maybe something happened in the cave itself. Then I gave up the idea of thinking about it and decided that I should take it and check it myself. Varvar did not think long, having motivation in the form of barbecue, so she quickly ran there. The dragon tried to stop her, but she did not stop. He had no choice, so the boy silently followed her into the middle. They went in there and there was even more slime. It became more and more unpleasant. The hero did not understand where all the reptiles had gone because she had not seen a single one since they entered. Even the monster's compass was silent. The guy thought that maybe they wanted to lure them into a trap, so he offered his sister to go back from there. When suddenly the whole ceiling started to glow green, these were reptiles, which in a moment began to attack our protagonists, who had not noticed them before. Green slugs began to fall on them from above, and they threw them off. Their opponents also began to spit at them with green food and crawl closer to them. This poison, although it was not very poisonous, but the effect depended on the quantity, and he had already begun to feel its effects a little. But he remembered the analogy with mosquitoes. The attack on them came from the main entrance, so the dragon began to use its explosive breath, starting to gather energy. The gorilla heard this and cleared the way so that it would not get to her. However, there was another problem, which was that someone else was approaching them from the same main entrance. Lin Yuan shouted for the little sister to escape from there and be careful. Ta pushed the monkey away to protect it. And the giant reptile knocked the dragon off its feet, and the little sister barely managed to avoid it. As a result, Lin Yuan flew into the wall of the cave, and the girl asked if everything was okay with him and if he was alive. The gorilla suddenly rose to its feet and began to carefully look around, thinking about what to do. Kui fell to the ground and was a little beaten up in this life, and they wanted to eat him and were close to it. But he could restrain the mouth of his enemy because he still had some strength. There was one more problem, and that was that in the middle, something seemed to glow green, and he was worried that it would explode now. The reptile did not explode, but spat at him with a large amount of poison, which knocked him off his feet. This saliva was eating away at him and burning his skin, and this was no longer a joke. He was leaning against the wall. In general, it was a direct descendant of the king of reptiles. He is the deputy of the current king. He was the head of the avant-garde group of reptiles. He participated in the destruction of Jiuan Island. The length was 60 meters and the weight was 480 tons. Then it dawned on the boy that if he was here, then they had approached the territory of the king of reptiles, because if it were not for this, the king's son would not have come for them. The dragon said that in that case he should take him prisoner and blackmail the king into leaving all their kind on the island. But I thought about whether this plan would work. While Lin Yuan was thinking, they started attacking him again and spitting poison at him. But already this time he was able to avoid the blow and was not injured. Already a plus. We live. We live. Kui thought that this opponent's poison bomb was very poisonous and had a lot of power. She could easily destroy a mountain. He was lucky only because the bomb was not extremely high, and because of this, he easily avoided the tragedy. His opponent did not move, and the hero began to suspect that he was preparing a super blow. And that was not good. Lin Yuan was right, and they began to attack him with a hail of poison. It was dangerous, even on the edge of life and death. He was scared to death because he did not know that TRJ could do that. I was nervous and panicked. He had snot and sweat dripping from his forehead, and his mouth fell to the ground. You could count all his sharp teeth. He was no longer able to escape from these blows and was hit more than once, forcing him to fall.
The boy fell on his back, and the gorilla, who was fighting off simple reptiles, tried to shout to him because she saw how he was attacked.
The battlefield was divided into 3 parts, where the barbarian, the giant reptile, and where Kui lay. Nevertheless, the blows took enough energy, and now he was trying to catch his breath. Lin Yuan did not get up and continued to lie down, the reptile looking on. And Varvar, who was also attacked, was looking at these two, but clearly not in the same way as the boy. Then she looked up and saw that there were drops created from the rock, and an idea popped into her head, which consisted in the fact that she suddenly jumped towards them with a scream, throwing off all the reptiles that were hanging on her. The monkey was able to grab hold of some of them quite easily and hold on to them. And after that, she started jumping on them from one to the other while still trying to catch her, but without success. She was already at a fast pace, almost approaching one of the main reptiles, which she wanted to get to. Then she jumped down from the ceiling and stood in front of the boy, acting as a defense, while the boy continued to lie without getting up. Then she clenched her fist hard and charged it straight at the reptile's face, so she was able to inflict some damage on her opponent. That he flew away. But at the same time, another huge reptile appeared, which was already preparing its blow with poison. Here the boy became active and shouted for her to be neat and take care of herself. the monkey was able to easily avoid the blow. And she began to talk about the fact that this blow was much worse than the explosive breath used by her brother. The dragon looked at all this and thought that because she dodged his explosive breath, she now has a strong reflex on this ground. After that, she approached the reptile and began to hit it hard on the head, and it still had no way to fight back. However, as it turned out, another blow flew in her direction from above. And she was busy beating, so she didn't see him. Fortunately, Kui had already activated the fight and shouted to her to be careful and to look behind her, because there is danger there, simultaneously squeezing small reptiles. However, this time, the girl could not dodge, and now she still got it, which was not the best thing that could happen. Due to the blow, she began to fall on her stomach, and even right in front of her enemy, Double Bingo comes out. But then she realized that everything was bad and hit the wall, and the angry reptile came closer and closer. Lin Yuan called out to her again. He was very worried about her. The boy did not understand why this poisonous bomb suddenly changed its direction and flew back. But his situation was not the best either. Since other small posy packs came closer and closer to him, they even began to climb on him, for which he already began to curse them. Because they were bothering him and he couldn't even help his sister properly. He got even angrier and told them that they all climbed on him for nothing and that it would only make them all worse. Namely, he began to grow his thorns, thereby impaling most of them, simultaneously sending them somewhere further. The reptile had already forced the monkey to lie down and prevented it from getting up and helping itself. And after that, they opened their mouths and began to collect their poison in readiness to drop it on the gorilla. Kui's tail appeared near her mouth, which interfered with this. Because after the boy fought off the reptiles, he was finally able to help the girl by pushing the huge reptile away with his tail. But as a result, the blow of that reptile flew at his other allies. But as it turned out, this poison did not take them, so they were able to reject it and redirected it back. The two heroes were shocked by what they saw and stood with their mouths open because they did not know that they could control them. The guy reacted faster, so he defended the girl, covering her from blows with his body. The girl was a little surprised by this and was not ready for it. Standing up, he said that he must have underestimated them too much because he thought they all didn't have much sense in their heads. But he did not even guess that they would want to play pinball with him. The monkey looked worried about the boy's condition, but the blows did not end there, and the carnage continued, but did not plan to end. Both of them managed to jump back and avoid getting hit, but the young man got angry and said that if they wanted to play, then he would make a game for him now. A stream of poison flew into a stone, to which one of the reptiles in a cap climbed. And the boy broke that stone with one movement of his tail, throwing the reptile away so that it would not hit them again. Also on that reptile was a cap, which he successfully took for himself, took the bat, and asked the monkeys how they liked his bow. But he told her to throw the ball and he would receive it. One of the reptiles started making noises that didn't mean anything good, at least for them. Both of them panicked and got nervous. The boy started looking around and the girl looked directly at the reptile. Suddenly, a lot of small reptiles appeared around them, which approached them from different directions. They did not understand when they all appeared there, but it was necessary to fight. Even the entire ceiling was in them. The boy looked up and thought about the plan. He needed to get close to them to use his crown strike. The giant among them had already started preparing for the next dozen blows and was gathering her strength. Everyone wanted to attack them. It was very bad, and the boy was trying to figure out what to do and how to get out of this situation safely. So he had a plan to use his new mental attack, which he did, sending waves at them all. So he was able to detain them and create a barrier around him. But this did not stop one of them, and she broke his entire barrier with her sharp claw and wanted to attack again. Or rather was already doing it. The dragon quickly realized that this was terrible for them. His roar made the reptilian bomb even more dangerous than before, which meant that it would be harder to dodge. The boy, in order to avoid the blow, lay down or folded himself into a certain accordion and thereby saved himself. The monkey simply jumped away from the attack, which also worked and saved her. Another problem was that the blows were repelled by others, and this made the situation of our heroes much worse. They pushed each other away and created a certain web from which it was almost impossible to escape, and it completely trapped them. And also, they had to cover their ears because the sound was terrible. Lin Yuan lamented that this almost made him a eunuch, But at the same time, he said that it was necessary to find a way so that the main one of them would not spit out this thing anymore. That reptile continued and continued to add wood to the fire, and putting them in a worse and worse situation, she herself did not worry at all. The boy didn't know what would happen next if he didn't find a way to shut him up, or they would drown in this poison, and they didn't need to. So he decided to use his explosive breath, which even surprised the monkey. Fortunately for him, they all came together to catch his charge, thus doing him a huge favor. As a result, they were all destroyed by that breath. The guy was happy because at least the reptiles he killed would no longer be able to redirect the weapon from the poisonous bomb, which was already helping him. So he decided to take another shot. He had a new plan, which was to stop thinking about the main bomb and deal with the little bugger's first slugs. However, the large reptile did not like his actions, so he quickly found himself near him and began to attack. The boy quickly noticed this, but it was too late and they were already able to injure him. He screamed in pain. And also, another blow was repelled, and he flew straight at him. He froze in shock, because he understood that most likely he would not have time to escape. Now the monkey has already shouted to him to be careful and continue to fend off small enemies. And she quickly threw one of the reptiles at him and told him to catch it while he looked at the bomb that was flying. The reptile did its job and deflected the stream of this poison against its will. But fortunately for the heroes, Lin Yuan smiled and was happy. But he said that it is genius to use them as a shield, and you can use it for your own benefit. The boy picked up one of the reptiles, and meanwhile, the big reptile was looking at him strangely and did not understand what he was doing. The dragon commented that from now on he is an online table tennis player with the name Lin Yuan. Ta told his sister that she could use the rotten reptile to strike back with the same poison bomb. He was attacked again, and he decided to show exactly how to defend himself and asked for her attention. He swung, but it didn't do anything because he did it too soon and everything got into him and it hurt a lot. The guy then tried to do it, but as it turned out, he was very bad with accuracy. He didn't understand why because he was doing everything as shown in the video, but nothing was working out for him. But this is not surprising because he never played it. He was able to parry a few attacks, but immediately others flew at him, the worst being the one that flew straight to his head. When she got there, he completely forgot about the need to defend himself, and others immediately flew to him while he panicked. But the monkey was better with accuracy. She was able to repel blows more easily, and mostly she was more agile and more gymnastic. His little sister stood in front of the dragon and said she would cover him as long as he kept his head and was grateful for it. The sister, unlike him, was a real online player and showed class, and she will be able to protect him. They did not stop being attacked, but only continued to direct poisonous bombs at them. Despite the number, the girl was able to repel all of them. Even the boy was delighted and enthusiastic. She repelled everything, but her fur was slightly burnt. But it was not the worst thing that could happen to them and to her. The boy beamed and couldn't believe his eyes. He was glad that their training had brought so many good results. While the boy stood and admired them, many other small reptiles approached them. Why are there so many of them? The main one of them started screaming again, which as always did not bode well for them. But others stood in defense of their future king. Also, many of them crawled to the ceiling again, which did not satisfy the girl, and she looked up at them. The boy yelled at her that they had changed their construction and to be careful and not get distracted. While they were standing and talking, they started to attack and launch bombs again. They were fed up already. The gorilla tried to defend himself as best he could and did it quite well and even successfully. But the small reptiles started hitting back at them again, which worsened their situation again. However, the girl's berserker mode opened. She shone with gold and began to repel them all with incredible speed, almost faster than light. From the side, it looked like a small tornado. All the jets reflected from each other and from the girl. The hero looked at it admiringly and thought that the girl was really good at it. But I wondered if it could be that their special training made her the strongest player of the national team. However, there was still the problem that no matter how the girl repelled them, the speed of the poisonous bomb did not decrease, but became even faster and faster. So he thought about how to improve their situation. But about the fact that it had to be stopped somehow. The large reptile opened its mouth to launch more bombs, and the boy suddenly shouted to her to throw all these poisonous bullets into the big head. She was surprised at first and did not understand. But she understood everything in a moment and began to try to do so. She was quite good at it and hit him in the mouth. The reptile smiled slyly and not in a good way with all its teeth, but at the last moment she hit them again with her long tail. Our hero's jaws dropped from shock. But he told her to keep aiming for the gorilla's mouth, and the gorilla did so. It already looked like some kind of plan. Now the blows were flying from them and their opponent didn't like it very much, but I did. Here the monkey began to get very angry, scowl, and look maliciously in the direction of the enemy. The enemy was looking at her, or at both of them with the same expression. He had so many eyes, it was hard to say exactly. Their enemy suddenly froze and then suddenly began to attack strongly again. The girl was panicking and the young man was preparing his explosive breath. After that, he launched it hard right into the face of the monster. Their enemy was able to dodge a little, but not completely, fortunately for the main characters. As a result, their enemy was left without most of its paws, which was already a small victory for them. The girl happily said that her brother is incredibly wonderful. He was sweaty and shaking, but played the role of cool, smiling a little at the girl. She said that the dragon looked and was very insidious, but in fact, nothing was over yet, so he quickly took her hand and ran, since they were already being chased and they didn't have much time. But the dragon could use explosive breath only twice a day, and besides it, he had no other such things. The monster glared at them and ran sharply after them while the dragon shouted that it was chasing them. They were ahead, but not by much. They could still be caught quite easily. The heroes were able to run out of the cave and ran in different directions while the monster ran after them straight out of the cave. But as soon as the monster ran out, the monkey gave him a footstool, and most importantly, with a smile. And it was because of this step that the big reptile fell to the ground. Now they were winning, the dragon approached the girl and said that these tricks could be used forever. And he did not remember them letting him down even once. The monster became angry and clenched his teeth. The dragon spoke, asking if he really thought they wanted to escape. This was not the case at all. It was a plan to anger him and get him out of the cave where he had more advantages because he was used to being in the cave, and its conditions were comfortable for him. But now the heroes didn't plan to give him a chance to get back. Both heroes are now guarding the entrance and ready to prevent the monster from entering. The giant reptile screamed, and we already know what it means. So, in a moment, many eyes of other reptiles became visible in the cave, and the heroes looked at it. But while they were thinking about them, they all started to attack them together, climb on their backs, and stir in all the forms in which they could. Another part of the reptiles ran to their boss, and there were also a lot of them in this part, but the main one was looking at the sky, enjoying the beauty. The reptiles started to climb on him as well, but not like Lin Yuan, but much more carefully. Also, something began to form from their poison, namely, a new arm for their main monster, which he was basically satisfied with. The boy looked at it in shock and did not understand how he could regenerate so quickly until his eyes became the size of 5 kopecks. At this moment, he thought that perhaps the body fluid of these reptiles is a good medicine that can make the dead person rise again. But he began to look at her carefully and as a result said that it was unfair. However, he had already completely regenerated and became the same as before, which did not mean anything good for them. Both of them just stared at him dumbly in shock and froze at this whole picture. The monster started attacking them again, but the dragon turned away from them and told the monkey sister to knock them all into the air. She got a little angry and started doing all this, all alone. He looked at it and said that when he talked about the big head, he meant that poison bombs in open terrain have no effect. Out of desperation, or I don't know why, the main monster began to eat his subjects, possibly gaining energy. Here the monkey and the dragon fell into even greater shock, not understanding what was happening there. But why does he eat his own people, and does he not distinguish whom he eats? The dragon also commented that, as he said, these reptiles are best at one thing, namely, delivering food directly into their mouths. They even climb into the mouth of their master, and he continued to eat them and eat them without stopping. Lin Yuan realized that something was definitely wrong here. It must have been some kind of sneaky plan of theirs. So, in a moment, he shouted to the monkey that they must hurry. But to prevent him from eating even more of these reptiles, so they ran there. While they were running, The boy asked the monkeys that she was jumping high, that he would catch these reptiles, and that she should go to the king's son and prevent him from eating more reptiles. The girl did so, leaping right at him with her quasi-weapon and a confident expression on her face as the dragon stomped and tossed the smaller ones from behind. The monkey landed, but immediately after that the reptile jumped away from her. The boss started attacking the heroes with his bombs again with new powers. All of them flew at the barbarian, who was standing in a position showing complete readiness for an attack and repelling it. But when the bombs really flew, she began to repel them with fury. She was already a complete pro, but when the heroine fought off one of them, her weapon, which consisted of a reptile, broke. As always, at the worst moment. And it was because of this that the bomb hit her, thereby knocking her back onto her back. The dragon saw this and became worried about her and began to walk closer to her and was angry, wanting to take revenge. The hero curled up in a ball and began to roll at speed, scattering everyone to the sides, which he himself was shocked by. The monster continued to attack, but since it was twisted, the blows were simply deflected by the reptiles that were attached to its back. This surprised their opponent, and he stopped attacking for a moment, standing there in a little shock. Lin Yuan finally stood up and asked if he wanted to know why he had been circling himself for so long. And this was in order to put on a protective armor directly from these terrible reptiles. A simple armor made of them needed eternal support, a lot of physical strength, and he wanted to finish it all as soon as possible. So, now he jumped to attack the monster with which they have been fighting for a very long time. Now, all the blows of the giant reptile were deflected from him, and he could advance closer and closer. The monster himself started to get nervous. The hero was getting faster, but the monster's attack was also getting faster and stronger. It wasn't good. Then he sent his enemy and told him to go further. But he began to attack the monster and, by the way, it was very successful because the spikes normally pricked the reptile like that. Those spikes made holes in the reptile from which an unpleasant, disgusting, horrible green liquid began to flow. And the hero there at times began to bite his hand with all his might and did the right thing. Victory was already almost in their pocket. Lin Yuan was able to bite off his hand, and the monster itself flew away and oozed the substance. In addition, the hero was also gathering strength for explosive breathing. And after that, he hit near the monster. Thus, he forced his opponent to fall on his back, and therefore, it was already bad. He shouted once more, gathering those small reptiles that were still alive around him, but he quickly started eating them again. The boy looked at it without understanding because he had not yet recovered all his limbs, but he ate them anyway. It was quite strange. Lin Yuan thought that maybe he was preparing for the finishing move, but the constant support of the reptilian armor still exhausted him a little and completely. He needed to hurry up and kill him faster. Therefore, while the monster continued to eat and was busy with it, he came closer and closer to him. However, he was noticed halfway, and he opened his mouth again. The hero replied that he would no longer go to the receptions he had resorted to the first time. Now his adversary had no forelimbs, but he could not even stand on the ground, and shouted that now they would see what he could do. This time, the huge reptile began to collect much more green energy than before. Because of this, a giant ball of green poisonous poison was created, and he directed it at the dragon. But he let this bullet fly. Then the boy was already scared and did not understand how he was able to spit out something of such huge dimensions. To turn his back to block this blow, or at least try to do so, pressed hard on the ground, but could not dislodge it, so he called the monkey to come and help him, which meanwhile was still on the ground after the impact. The little sister, the monkey, said that she was already running and that he should stay there. Running up, she began to push the bullet, but she did it because of the boy, who felt sick after being hit in the stomach and asked her to be softer. Otherwise, she would kill him sooner. With the rest, they were able to move him, and at the same time, they fell on top of each other, and the boy's armor began to fall apart. Nevertheless, they were very happy, because the boy did not think that they could actually move this sphere. But this couple could. Lin Yuan then said that he would repay the king's son with the same coin and shot an explosive breath through the sphere. The monster opened its mouth just then, causing a jet from Lin Yuan to fly straight there. So they were finally able to defeat the son of the reptile king, and the boy sat down to rest and catch his breath. He was tired, but glad it was over. The gorilla sat down not far from him and sincerely praised him with a smile for the fact that her little brother was so incredibly strong. At the end, the blue dragon looked down at the ground. It would seem that there could be, but in fact, after they won, the soil, which was terrible, destroyed and unsuitable for any living thing, was able to revive. On it, as in ancient times, plants and grass began to grow, and butterflies of incredible beauty began to fly over it again. And this is what surprised the main character so much. When both heroes noticed it, they looked down as if it were a miracle, not understanding how this could happen. Because of this, Lin Yuan again turned to Xiao Kun, who this time was dressed as a scientist, and asked if he knew what was going on here. And also received an answer quite soon, who said that he noticed a certain liquid in the reptiles, a force that did not belong to this world. It was she who took away all the life force from where they were, everything died and became just a grey mass. Also, Xiao Kun wanted to study it in more detail, so he did it in his mini laboratory. Because it was very important because their energy was very diluted, but luckily both of them were able to deal with the reptilian prince who had this energy very pure and harmonious.